optimal minimal.
At this altitude, I can run flat out for a half mile before my hands start shaking.
Can I answer your personal question?
Now would seem an appropriate time.
What if I did the opposite?
I'm a cybernetic organism, living tissue over a metal endoskeleton.
Tim Ferriss Show.
This episode is brought to you by AG1, the daily foundational nutritional supplement that supports whole body health. I do get asked a lot what I would take if I could only take one supplement. And the true answer is invariably AG1. It simply covers a ton of bases. I usually drink it in the mornings and frequently take their travel packs with me on the road. So what is AG1? AG1 is a science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food sourced nutrients. In a single scoop, AG1 gives you support for the brain, gut, and immune system. So take ownership of your health and try AG1 today. You will get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first subscription purchase. So learn more, check it out. Go to drinkag1.com/Tim. That's drinkag1, the number 1, drinkag1.com/Tim. Last time, drinkag1.com/Tim. Check it out. Hello, boys and girls, ladies and germs. This is Tim Ferriss, and welcome to another episode of The Tim Ferriss Show, where it is my job to deconstruct world-class performers of all different types across all different industries and areas of expertise. In this episode, we have Jason Fried on Twitter at Jason Fried, F-R-I-E-D, Basecamp.com. He is the co-founder and CEO of Basecamp, previously known as 37 Signals, a Chicago-based software firm. The company's flagship product, Basecamp, which I've used for many, many years, is a project management and team communication application trusted by millions. He is also the co-author of Getting Real, subtitle The Smarter, Faster, Easier Way to Build a Successful Web Application, which is available for free at gettingreal.37signals.com. He is also the co-author of the New York Times bestseller Rework and Remote, subtitle Office Not Required. There's also a new book coming soon, It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work. And you can actually thread those together to tell a lot of this story. Jason writes a regular column for Inc. magazine and is a frequent contributor to Basecamp's popular blog, popular is an understatement, Signal versus Noise, which offers, quote, strong opinions and shared thoughts on design, business, and tech, end quote. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
And we have traded so many email over the years, and certainly met on a handful of occasions. And you have to be one of the most requested guests for this podcast. So I'm thrilled that you were able and willing to make the time. So many thanks.
Thank you to everybody who wanted to hear me. I don't know why, but it's great to hear that I'm wanted.
Well, I think part of why people like to hear from you, and maybe it's a love-hate thing, but I think that what you said to me before we started is indicative. So one was in response to what I always say to guests, and that is you have final cut, so it's better to kind of go a little over the edge and we can pare it back later. And you said, actually, I don't want that much control. Whatever I say should go out into the world. In effect, is what you said. And you are known for being very raw and contrarian, which I think has great appeal to a lot of people, particularly in the current climate that we don't need to describe for everybody to understand. And I'll start, given that, with a quote from Jeff Bezos, the trillionaire in the making behind Amazon. Quote, Jason is immune to dogma and has much to teach. In 37 Signals, he has built an elegant company with elegant products based on the idea that less is more. Now, of course, this is before we went from 37 Signals to Basecamp, but I'd love to talk about this immune to dogma component, and we could certainly talk about less is more. Jeff ended up investing in your company, which is a whole separate story that we've covered in some respects with the conversation I had with your partner in crime, DHH, separately, so we won't dig into that. But what I'm really curious to know is this immune to dogma ability to question assumptions. How much of that is an innate skill versus an acquired skill?
I guess it's hard for me to say from where I sit, but I think a big part of it is that I don't really pay attention to a lot of things, actually. So maybe I have different points of view because I haven't heard the other ones, or I have different points of view because I haven't let society's norms and the general point of view get into my head. So I have to come up with my own ideas. I've always I pay attention to some degree, but I'm pretty oblivious to a lot of things intentionally because I don't want to be influenced that much. And it's one of the reasons why I don't read industry news. I read very little news in general, but I definitely don't read industry news. I don't want to know what everyone else is doing. I find it's very easy to end up following and being like everybody else when you're constantly hearing what everyone else has on their mind. It's very hard then to fight against that. So by not filling my mind with other people's ideas, I have nowhere to go but to follow my own. And I think that perhaps that's why I'm immune to dogmas. I just don't even pay attention to it.
You just don't have as much exposure.
Yeah, and that's intentional. Yeah.
What are some of the parameters or rules for yourself, structures, systems, anything that you've put in place to find that sweet spot of deliberate, selective ignorance, so to speak?
Yeah. A lot of it is just kind of going with the flow and I don't have a lot of structure. For example, I don't have routines. I don't have any goals. I've never had any goals. Goals are not something that I pay attention to. I just sort of do what I feel like is the right thing to do in any given situation. And I don't look long term at things other than I want to, like, for example, be in business over the long term. I'd like to live over the long term. I'd like to be nice and getting better over the long term, but I don't have goalposts along the way. So because of that, and because I don't have much of a routine, I sort of just take it as it comes. And I think that also perhaps allows me to sidestep a lot of the ways you're supposed to do things, and because I don't plan and because I don't think too far ahead on any individual one thing, I just able to sort of go where I need to when I need to. And I know it's funny because I'll talk to a lot of people about this, and people are, come on, you must have some goals, like, this or that. And I really, really don't have any. I can't remember ever having one. I just do the best I can in any given situation. And that's the best I can do. And however that ends up playing itself out over time is how it ends up playing itself out over time. I don't want to measure up. One of my favorite quotes is, gosh, I forget now who it is. Maybe it's Mark Twain, but he's probably said everything, or everything's attributed to him. But
it could have been Abe Lincoln.
Yeah, or Einstein, one of them, right? Basically, comparison is the death of joy, and I love that quote because it comes down to people, it comes down to situations, and it also comes down to goals and setting goals. For me, I don't want to compare myself to an idea I had 2 years prior, of where I wanted to be. I don't know where I'm going to want to be in 2 years. So to set a goal that's long term, in some cases, you're actually setting it for, who you are when you set it versus who you are when you're going to get there. And that's something that a friend of mine told me once. And I thought, a guy named Jim Coudal, who I thought was it's a wonderful quote. I don't know if it's his or someone else's, but it really rang true. And so that's kind of how I go about the world.
Well, let's look at that in a real world example, because this is something that, as I'm sure you've experienced, and as you noted, people react to with a certain level of disbelief, right? You have a profitable company, 17 out of 17 years, or now what I read may be out of date, but however many years out of however many years.
Yeah.
And you have an organization. You are successful, certainly by almost any objective measure. What did the last week look like? We're recording this on a Thursday afternoon, so we're coming up to the tail end of what most people would consider a business week. And if you don't have goals, you must have some means of making better decisions versus shitty decisions. So could you maybe walk us through what this week has looked like for you, how you've spent your time, which I know is very broad, but perhaps you can use that as a launching point.
Yeah, this week was a little tricky because I had some personal stuff I had to deal with in the beginning of the week. So we'll take like the week before or something like that.
Perfect.
So, at Basecamp, we work in what we call 6-week cycles. So we don't work on anything. Okay, I'm generalizing, but for the most part, we don't work on anything that takes longer than 6 weeks to do. So our goals technically are to deliver something great within 6 weeks, whatever we're building. As an organization, that's sort of where our goals are. But I don't have personal goals. Like I don't have a goal. Like if we don't set personal goals. We don't set company-wide goals in terms of this feature will be successful if, or if it brings in this amount of money, it'll be worth it, or anything like that. Our goal, if you do want to use the word, is just to do the best job we can. So last week I met with a couple teams who were doing some projects and kind of reviewed them with them and tried to help them through some problems, work through some ideas. We're just finalizing some stuff on our book. So I'm working on the book that we're finishing now. Our manuscript is due in a couple of weeks. So I did some of that. But really it's all about what we're actually doing at the moment versus sort of the big picture as to why we're doing it, other than we just want to do a good job. We have an idea. We've set out some work we're going to do over the next 6 weeks, and just helping people get there and do the best we can, and also make decisions and cut things and say, we can't do all these things we want to do. What's the important part of this? So I love trying to get to what's the most important part of something versus, we don't have any, for example, we don't have any KPIs at Basecamp. We don't have
key performance indicators.
Yeah. I didn't even know what that meant, by the way, until recently, because I heard everyone talking about them. I'm like, do we have those? And they go, oh no, we don't have those. So we don't have those.
Just to pause for a second. So yeah. For people who are like, what? TPS reports. So KPIs, KPIs are referred to very often in startup vernacular, particularly in the tech world, as key performance indicators, which refer to the few or handful of metrics that are prized and most valued within your company. And that could be revenue per employee, it could be monthly unique users, or any number of other things. Week on week growth of X, who knows? So sorry to interrupt, right. But just for people who don't come from that world. So you don't have KPIs.
Don't have that. We don't have revenue growth number targets. So we don't have goals. We don't have targets. We don't have KPIs. We don't have sort of those kinds of reasons for doing what we do every day. The reason we do what we do every day is because we enjoy doing it, and we want to make what we're working on better. And we're making the thing that we're making for others, we're also making for ourselves. So we technically want to make our own tooling better because it helps us do a better job with what we do. So it really is this day-to-day or week-to-week or every 6 weeks sort of rolling thing where you set out some stuff you want to do. You do it the best you can. At the end of those 6 weeks, we take a week or two off from scheduled work, and we do other things at work. We roam around, have new ideas, play with some stuff. And then we pick another set of projects to do over the next 6 weeks. And we just kind of go as we go and course correct as we go. And we just don't have any of these big picture things. So my weeks look like feedback. My weeks look like thinking. They look like writing. Sometimes it requires me to debate things internally with people, to lay out some reasons for why we're doing things. But my week is not pointed in any one direction other than what we're really doing right now. So it is very much a day-to-day sort of existence, which is why it's sort of an incompatible existence with goals, with long-term goals, with figures and numbers and stuff. I don't want to be upset about expectations. So another thing I don't have are any expectations. I would hate to, for example, let's say the company we were expected to grow 22% next year. I'm making up numbers here, right? And we grew 21. Like that would be a reason at a lot of companies to be upset. That is a ridiculous reason to be upset. Like, how would everyone be upset with that? But when you set out these numbers and these goalposts and these goals and these expectations and you don't hit them, then you're upset. And once you've actually either hit them or not hit them, then you come up with another set, and you just keep moving these moments of possible joy, but most likely disappointment in a lot of cases. And I just don't feel like setting those up for myself. So I just ignore the whole thing.
Okay. I've all of these various bits and pieces that I've gathered through research, and I suspect that I'm just going to get hung up on a couple of things I really want to explore, and that's just going to be the way it goes.
Let's go into it.
All right. So there are many people listening who are familiar with Basecamp and the blog and so on. and are saying, I would love to have a company or a product as successful as Basecamp, but I don't know how to go from where I am, which is goal-oriented, having KPIs, etc., to perhaps the other end of the spectrum, which is closer to Jason. So I suppose embedded into that is the question of, should they even want to emulate that? But secondly, if someone said, yes, I've decided I want to move more in that direction, what might be a step they could take or steps they could take to inch them a little bit closer to where you are and a little further away from, oh my God, I wanted to hit 22. We hit 21. We're a failure.
Right. Well, first off, I do want to make it really clear that this is simply what works for me in our organization. So I am not suggesting this is the only way, the best way, whatever. This works for us. So if what works for you and you're very goal oriented and KPI driven and you think, you need to the things you measure, the thing or whatever it is, I forget how that saying goes. What you measure is what you move or whatever. I don't know.
What gets measured gets managed.
That's the one, right? So if you're like that and you think that things are great for you and things are working well for you, please do not even consider changing. Like, keep doing that. I think though, if you're doing all of those things and you feel a sense of sort of a lack of fulfillment, or you're maybe consistently disappointed, or you're reaching for things that you can't seem to grab, I would suggest, trying some of the things I'm suggesting, which is pull back your expectations a bit. Just sort of try to set out to do the best you can versus try to measure up with a number that you've made up. And that's the other thing that I think is important here, is that any projection that you set out to hit is a guess. Like you personally are making, or someone at your organization or whatever is making a guess, and they're picking a number and they're saying, this is where we think we should be because this is sort of what we did last year. And because of that, we want to do a little bit better this year. But all this stuff is still just man-made. None of these things are inherent in existence. They're all man-made things, these numbers, these goals, these figures. So if you can begin to strip that back and sort of recognize that that's the case and say, like, what if I tried to function without setting any of these, but I just did the best work I can anyway, because isn't that what I should be doing anyway, no matter what? So my suggestion would be, as with anything, I'm not a big fan of trying to massively change anything at once. So I think my suggestion would be, like, whatever the next project you have that you're working on, if you would normally set out some goalposts or set out some figures to hit or whatever, or measure this, just try not measuring one of those things. Just pick one little tiny thing that you can throw away and not worry about, and see what happens. And you'll probably find that the sky isn't falling and the business isn't crashing and people aren't running aimlessly around not wondering what to do. That actually, in fact, people will, if you explain why you're doing it, because you want to make this better, because simply you want to make it better and you think it could be better or whatever, and you lay that out, that people will be motivated enough by that the numbers and the figures don't necessarily, they're not the things that are pulling you forward. What's pulling you forward, hopefully, is your intrinsic motivation and your desire to do a better job at what you're doing, and the sort of appreciation of the craft and the respect of the work that you're doing and who you're doing it for, and that's kind of enough, and that everything else is sort of a side effect of that. So anyway, I'd say pick one little thing, throw it away, don't worry about it, and see what happens. You'll probably find out that everything's just okay. And then maybe you'll have the courage to try it with another little thing that you are measuring that you don't really care so much about. And I know I'm well aware that this flies in the face of a lot of people's worldview and maybe even yours. I know you're big into measuring things, especially health-wise and whatnot. So again, I think it comes down to also, most importantly, knowing who you are and what matters to you, and not trying to be like somebody else. There's a lot of people trying to be like other people, and I don't want anyone to try and be like me. You should be like yourself, and if there's 5% of what I'm saying makes sense to you, then maybe you can pull that in and make that part of you too. But I don't think you should be out there trying to be someone else, because that's a bit of an artificial situation.
Well, you've mentioned directly and alluded to perhaps a few things I'd like to underscore just for folks listening. The first is that when one reads a quote or hears a quote like "what gets measured gets managed," it can often be taken to mean that you should manage everything and therefore you should measure everything, and that there is only upside in measuring. But that's simply not the case. And for instance, whether it's I remember Andy Grove, I believe it was, of Intuit talking about how for every metric that you track and hold people accountable for, you have to identify, and then also assess the perverse incentive you've created by imposing that metric. So if people respond to incentives and you create a metric, humans being humans, they will look for easier and easier ways to, say, goose that number up or chop that number down. And you have to be aware of what that does to their behavior and so on within the company. But secondly, measurement, there are things worth measuring, and then there are things not worth measuring that can become vanity metrics that people use just to feel productive instead of being productive. And just to point to one thing that you mentioned, which I think a lot of people would assume of me, that is I physically track a lot of things all the time, and not to say you assume that, but there's a point to my tracking, which is identifying what works for, say, my physiology, what harms me based on my genotype or whatever it might be. And then I just stop the vast majority of measurement and do it very intermittently, right? So the follow-up to that I'd love to ask for people, since you mentioned you don't read much, if any, trade publications or news, what do you read? What are you reading? And maybe that's another opportunity for people to pare back on I'm not going to say thoughtless, it's too judgmental, but a habit that perhaps consumes a lot of time without adding much value. So what do you if not that kind of stuff, what type of stuff do you read? And what have you been reading recently, or what are you reading?
Yeah, let me get to that in 1 second. But I had a thought about the previous question. Sort of the genesis of this for me is I used to do a lot of jogging. I still do a little bit, but I kind of had some knee surgery a while ago, and so I've sort of not been doing it as much. But I remember trying to hit certain times. Like I want to, run a 6.5 minute mile or whatever it was at the time. And, I'd go out and I'd run a 6 minute mile in 42 seconds. And I remember being disappointed by that. And I remember feeling like, wait, why should I be disappointed in that? I'm not running a race. I'm not competing against anybody. I'm sort of competing against myself, but I set that up for myself. That's not something I had to do. Like I created that moment to be upset. What if I just went out and ran because I enjoy running and just kind of run the best I can every time I run and just do that? And I found that I started doing that and I enjoyed it more. And it didn't mean I didn't run faster or slower. I didn't even necessarily know, and it didn't really matter. I could feel whether or not like it was a good run. Like that was a good run. I had a good run today was sort of a much better way to figure out my sort of satisfaction than to measure it and say it was a 6 minute and 42 minute run versus a 6 minute and 38 second run. And I think that that's kind of where it sort of came into play for me in business too. So I think I pulled it from that. I wanted to share that because I just remembered that was sort of a moment. And I don't remember how old I was when I did that. It was probably actually in high school or early in college or something where I started to think that way. And that's maybe where that came from too. But anyway, I wanted to get that in there. Reading. What do I read? Well, I started reading the paper more, which is like the newspaper, not online news sources, but actually the newspaper. And this happened because I was at a hotel. This is a few years ago. I was at a hotel, and you go to a hotel and they ask you, check in. They say, would you like a newspaper? And I used to always go, no, newspaper. Who reads newspapers anymore? And then, because I get all my news on the internet, which is instant all the time. And the thing is, most of that's not actually news. It's entertainment. I think the news, like once a day, is actually a perfectly good pace for the news. So if you get the news in the morning, you're basically getting all of yesterday's stuff that happened in the world that someone, some editors decided was important. And they put that in the news, they print it, and then the next morning you get it. And then if you wait another full day to get the news again, pretty good chance that you didn't miss anything, actually. by paying attention to things all the time. Very few things happen during the middle of the day that you really absolutely need to know, that you can't wait for the next morning to know. And so I've realized that the newspaper is actually a better way to get the news because it's better. The pace is better. It prevents you from searching and seeking out news that you don't need to know about necessarily. It prevents you from playing the sport. I call it like the sport of information, like trying to know more than everybody else and be faster to the latest story than everybody else. So that's turning into a sport. And in fact, the news is presented. If you watch any news channel now, it's presented as a sport. I mean, you've got these chyrons going across the bottom, these graphics scrolling across. You've got talking heads that are sort of debating. You turn on ESPN or you can turn on CNN, and if you hid the logos, you couldn't tell the difference really. And so news coverage has turned into sports coverage and vice versa. And I just would rather say like once a day is enough of a general interval for me to be relatively well informed about what's really going on in the world. Also at the resolution that matters. I think the other problem I have, and by the way, I look at Twitter and I click on links here and there and I read some stuff that I like, but for the most part, I'm not trying to find out what happened an hour ago. And that to me is actually the real advantage to something like the newspaper, where you simply cannot find out what happened an hour ago, because what happened an hour ago in most cases doesn't matter. Now you could say, what if there's a national disaster or a major tragedy or school shooting and your kids at the school? Like there's all sorts of moments, of course, where real time truly does matter. But for the most part, it doesn't matter at all. And in fact, it's worse because you become there's the fear of missing out. Like I think of it as JOMO, like the joy of missing out. I'm happy to miss out. I'll miss out on most things.
Is that, did you come up with that?
Yeah. I mean, that's in our new book,
okay.
Which is like, it's great. I don't need to know all this stuff all the time. And yeah, again, like, look, if there's a like I'm in LA right now. If there's a mudslide like coming to my house, like I should know about that, right? Obviously. But that's something that might happen every, hopefully never, and maybe once a decade. And to say that I need to be informed real time about anything that could possibly happen anytime because that one thing might happen once, that's just a recipe for anxiety. And I try to avoid that at all costs.
Definitely. Yeah. Now, I know you are a fan, to give one example, of a book titled Seeking Wisdom, From Darwin to Munger by Peter Bevelin. Could you describe or just explain why you like that book, which is also one that I love? It was actually sent to me by Derek Sivers, of all people. Folks can look him up, tim.blog/Sivers, if you want to learn more about him. But Seeking Wisdom from Darwin to Munger by Peter Bevelin. Great book. Can you explain why you like that book and any other books that you're also fond of?
Yeah, so it's been a while since I've read that. So a book review would be really embarrassing. But what I'll tell you is this. I love Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett. What I love about those two guys, and of course this book is not written by them, but it's sort of the spirit of it, which is this very clear, direct, no bullshit way of writing, this very sort of simple folksiness that, you know what? Life really necessarily, I mean, I know this is a broad generalization, but in most cases, it's not that complicated. We tend to make things very complicated and we tend to make things very hard on ourselves. But really, there's some basic fundamentals of many things that if you kind of understand those, you're in pretty good shape and you don't need to go much further than that. And I love that kind of wisdom. I love old people in general. So Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, I think Munger's in his 90s now and Buffett's in his 80s, but they've always had this kind of wisdom, which is this old school, almost farmer's almanac style wisdom. And I've always been attracted to that because I think complexity has also become a sport where it's like the more complicated something is, the better, the better you think you are at it. Like if you make it more complicated, you're better at it or something. And I just think it's kind of the opposite. So I love those guys. And that book to me sort of highlighted a lot of that kind of thinking. And so anything that Munger's written, I love reading like Warren Buffett's letter to his shareholders, which I think is a must read for anybody.
100% agreed.
Yeah. Forget even just business people. Just if you want to read clear writing, if you want to understand what it's like to communicate something at a high level, you've got to read what he writes. So that's the kind of stuff I love to read. I like Bezos' shareholder letters as well for similar reasons. That's the kind of stuff I'm really interested in. I don't read fiction at all. And maybe I'm missing out there, but my argument is always that I feel like the world is so interesting on its own that there's more than enough I can read about real stuff. I know some people are going to just hate me for this, and I always get hate on it. But I just would rather read biographies, or I'd rather read about nature. Or I'd rather read about that stuff because the world is fascinating as it is. So those are the kinds of things I'm into these days. And I've been reading. I know you're deep into this now. I've been reading a lot about Stoicism, and I'm getting into that. So that is it the Art of Joy, Ancient Art of Joy, or something? What's that?
Yeah, The Art of Joy by William something or other. I'm blanking. I'll put it in the show notes for everybody, which is
that book.
Compilation of both, I suppose, excerpts and samples, but also interpretations and applications of Stoic philosophy.
Loved it.
I want to say William Irving, maybe.
That's it.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think that's it. So I read that recently or last year and really loved that. I've been getting into a bit of that. I don't know. That's the kind of stuff I'm into these days.
Why is that?
Stoicism or just
Stoicism?
Yeah. It just resonates with me. A few basic things, by the way. I don't need to go that deep into it again. It's not like I need to go super deep into the whole world of it. But basically, things like you pretty much only have control over your reactions to things, and I think that in itself is enough. I could stop there. I go further, but I could stop there and say that is extremely poignant, especially today. I see people, getting so wound up about what other people say and what other people do, and when you begin to see that what they're actually being wound up about is their own reaction to that thing, not the thing itself. The thing itself, maybe it's terrible, maybe it's great, whatever it is, but it's how you sort of respond to it and how you allow it to affect you. That's deep and really important, and I think one of the best lessons I've learned in the past few years. So there's that. Also, just negative visualization, I think, is a really wonderful tool, and I'm paying a lot of attention to that in my life.
Can you, just for people who aren't familiar with that, would you mind describing that just in brief, what that is, negative visualization?
Yeah, as far as I understand it, at least, it's basically figuring out what the worst case scenario might be in any given situation and coming to terms with that, and sort of realizing that probably in many cases it won't be as bad as you think it could be. So get used to the worst thing. And David and I talk about this occasionally, right? So DHH and I talk about this in the business, like, what if we made some grave, horrible errors? So the business has been in business for 18 years. And what if the competition destroys us or whatever? Like, what if we actually go out of business in 2 years? Like, what if that actually happens? We don't want that to happen. But what if it did? Like, what's the worst thing that would happen? Well, it would be terrible because a lot of people would lose their jobs and that would suck. But we think a lot of people who work for us would have no problem finding other jobs. So that wouldn't maybe be so bad. I would have no income and Dave would have no income. That would suck, but we've done pretty well for ourselves, so we could live fine without that. We couldn't do what we loved doing every day. Well, that would kind of suck, but maybe we could still do it, just not in that capacity. And you know what? A 20-year run isn't so bad. Like, if we only made it 20 years in business, that wouldn't be so bad either. So just thinking about, like, what would be the worst thing that could possibly happen, and then, recognizing that probably will not happen, it just helps you, I think, calm down about that. And it sort of avoid this constant set of worries. In some ways, you sort of get all the worrying out at once, and then you go about your day and go, well, if that happens, then it happens. At least I know what that's going to feel like, or what I think that might feel like. It's not that it would eliminate all of the feelings, and there certainly would be other negative feelings I may have missed. But for the most part, I've thought it through, and I feel like I can probably cope with it now if that actually happens, versus having something surprise you in the moment and having it be real. That can be really traumatic and really difficult to handle. So that's my general understanding of that, at least.
That's a great description.
Description?
Definitely. I think it's a great description. And just by analogy, I was just thinking this, because I'm sitting in this room where I do a lot of recording, and I did an episode with a former MMA fighter, but also special forces sniper named Tim Kennedy. And he's a beast of a fighter and a fascinating guy. But he was saying Oh, in my bag right now, I have X, Y, and Z firearm. I have enough first aid that I could patch you and the videographer together if one of you had an arm chopped off. I'm looking at how I could block the doorway in case of A, B, and C, and he knows exactly how to assess the situation in specifics. And the reason that I bring that up is, as you were describing this negative visualization, I was thinking to myself, it's something akin, metaphorically speaking, to taking a fear. Let's just say you have a semi-nebulous fear of something going wrong. And let's say that fear is then embodied by a person, and that person says, I'm going to destroy you. And then you run away, and all day or all week you're thinking, oh my God, that person's going to destroy me. How are they going to destroy me? And there's this ambiguity that's really stress producing. But if you were to sit down with that person and say, okay, I know you're going to destroy me, but I want to know exactly how you're going to destroy me. They're like, well, first, I'm going to ambush you at the corner of 2nd and Colorado, and I'm going to try to hit you with this type of bat. And you're like, okay, now I know where, I know what they're going to do. I can start planning a response, right? Or they say, I'm going to beat you to death with a Nerf baseball bat, and you're like, that's actually not going to beat me to death at all. And you start to realize how recoverable a lot of this is. Almost all of these fears are either completely unfounded or completely recoverable or preventable. And it's really arguably the most valuable thing I have learned from any type of reading of philosophy is this negative visualization, which I tend to do in written form, in an exercise that I call fear setting, which people can Google and find for free everywhere. But I'll stop my soapbox speech at this point about the fear setting and negative visualization, but it's extremely powerful. And I think this is particularly true, at least in my experience, if you come from a family, as I did, of worriers, people who spent a lot of time focused on the future with a high baseline of anxiety. And whether that is innate to my code, to my DNA, or simply an adopted set of behaviors and beliefs and thought patterns, I don't know. Maybe it's a combination, but it's really been hugely, hugely helpful.
Yeah, I feel like that's similar. I feel like I worried a lot, and I still do. I still battle with this, and I do kind of feel like it is a battle, actually, in a sense, with worrying. And I've stopped worrying about myself, but I have a 3.5-year-old now, so I worry about him, and I find myself realizing that kids are actually really quite resilient, and I shouldn't be worrying so much, that things are going to be just fine. And it's actually a really good practice for me to use negative visualization when I'm worrying about things like, oh, he's going to go to school and get sick, and then he's going to have the flu, and then I'm going to get the flu, and if I get the flu, then I can't do this, and their whole house, my wife's going to get the flu, and she's pregnant, and then you go through all this stuff, and it's like, yeah, that could happen, and you can't stop it. I can't prevent kids go to school and they get sick, and you might get sick, and okay, but if you think about how bad it can be, you start to really ruminate on it versus yeah, that could happen, and if that happens, it happens. You just deal with it and live with it, but I remember before I got into this negative visualization, I would actually worry a lot. And what's cool about negative visualization, I think, is it clears the worry out of the room in a sense. You give it a worry, you worry about it for a while, and then it's over. The worrying is over. And I think that's the key insight for me in it, which is it gives me a moment to say, yeah, okay, I'm going to worry about this, and I'm going to worry about it as bad as it could possibly be, and think about how exactly horrible it could be. And then I'm done with that. And that's the difference compared to consistent, low grade, always on worry, where you'd never have that moment where you can really confront it until it happens, when it usually doesn't.
Definitely. And I looked up the title of the book. The author is William B. Irvine, like Irvine, California. And the title is A Joy. Wow, I can't even read it correctly. All right, here we go. A Guide to the Good Life, subtitle The Ancient Art of Stoic Joy. And
that's the one. And
it is a fantastic introduction to Stoicism, and by itself, if you never read another book on the subject, extremely, extremely helpful. Yeah. You mentioned your son, right? You have a son, and I'm curious if we turn back the clock Do you remember the first time you got in trouble, or any memorable early memory of getting into trouble?
Oh my God, I got into so much trouble when I was younger. The first time though, I remember the first time I cried so hard that I almost couldn't breathe. You know that crying where you
Sure.
hyperventilate?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember why that happened, but I'm sure I did something really bad. And I think my parents like reminded me how bad it was or something, and I got really scared. I think I don't remember how old I was, but I remember that moment. I got in a lot of trouble when I was younger. I probably should have gotten in more trouble. I probably got away with too many things as well. But I got into a lot of trouble. Like my parents would have to pick me up at the police station when I was younger.
What?
I had bad reputation. When I was younger, like I'm talking like 15,
Yeah.
like that kind of thing, or 14. Junior high was bad. Like what is that? 13, 14, something like that. 15,
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Yeah, I was really bad. I kind of got in with a bad crowd and started doing some bad stuff. Although it wasn't so bad.
What were the offenses?
Let's get specific. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's actually entrepreneurial stuff.
Side hustle.
Yeah, yeah, right. Before it was called that.
Continue.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just imagining the expression you just made, like the wince as I said
Yes.
that.
You know me well.
Go ahead.
So I was, I don't know when the entrepreneurial bug bit me, but it bit me early. And I loved knives and like throwing stars and like switchblades, although I couldn't get those because those were illegal. I just love that kind of stuff.
How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
Probably today. How old am I now?
Today, yeah.
43.
Okay, so yeah, we're of the same vintage.
Yeah.
So I had too much caffeine, so I'm interrupting you. But we grew up when like ninjas and breakdancing were as cool as it could, as cool as you could possibly be. Yes. And there was a catalog called Asian World of Martial Arts. I don't know if you remember this.
Yes.
AWMA.
Yes.
Anyway, just to put some context. So at that time, people like you and me, it was not infrequent that young guys, definitely mostly young guys, would fantasize about throwing stars and climbing claws and grappling hooks. So just to set the stage. Yeah. All right, please continue. So
I don't remember how this happened. Somehow, maybe it was my dad who got on this mailing list, or I got on this, and we were starting to get these catalogs at home. And one of them was that one. Another one was called Sportsman's Guide. There's a few other ones where it's kind of like army surplusy stuff. And I don't really remember exactly how it all happened, but I started looking through the pages and there were these cool knives and throwing stars and like some ballistic knives, like knives you could actually like shoot with a spring, like crazy shit, just crazy stuff. And I just got into it and like tear gas and this kind of weird shit. So a 13-year-old boy, for me, it was just the coolest thing in the world, right? I don't know why, but I was so into it.
Oh,
and
for
so
sure.
I started to take these catalogs and make Xerox copies of these pages and then cut them out and then reassemble my own catalog. And I would I would kind of scratch out the prices and like put new prices on them and then make catalogs, which I would then distribute to my friends. My friends then would buy these knives and stuff from me. I would then, so I'd take these orders and I would make an order form and everything. And I would take these things. And this was back in like 85. I remember I got my first Mac in 85. And so I was like using my Mac to like print stuff out, my image writer or whatever I had at the time. And I'd make these catalogs and these order forms and print the stuff out and distribute it to some friends. And they would like make orders. I'd get the cash from them. Everyone had like part-time jobs. So they'd give me some cash. I'd get the cash. I would place an order through these catalogs for this stuff. I'd order it COD which I don't know if they have that anymore, called cash on delivery. I don't think they have that anymore, but I didn't have a credit card. For those of you who are much younger and don't remember or don't know what this was, UPS could actually come to your house, bring a package, and you would pay the UPS driver. The UPS driver would then take that money and put it in an envelope and then send it back to the company. And that's how you'd actually buy things sometimes. So anyway, I get cash. I'd order stuff COD. I'd fake that I was sick that day. I'd stay home from school. I knew when it was going to be delivered. The UPS driver would come. I would give him the cash. and I'd get these things and I'd distribute them to my friends and I would make a profit. And then I did that with like cigarettes and chewing tobacco and all sorts of stuff. And so I kind of like, then I had a bit of a reputation as a pyro because I love fireworks and fire and stuff. So anyway, I got into a lot of trouble eventually, as you can imagine, selling contraband to 15-year-old boys in the suburbs of Chicago. And then like, I kind of got in with the wrong crowd, and then like all sorts of weird things happened at some point. But anyway, I eventually like got that out of my system. But that's how I started getting into being an entrepreneur is that. And I love the idea of carving up other people's catalogs and making my own. And then I got a reseller's license somehow and got into electronics and started being able to buy things at like dealer cost from these big distributors. And then like, for example, radar detectors, so my friends could speed, 16. So like, let's go speed, let's go get a radar detector in our car. So I'd buy radar detectors at like cost, double the price, sold them to my friends because they couldn't get them. And telephone, like cordless phones was, back then, like then computer hard drives in the early days, and then computers. And that's kind of how I got into all this stuff. But it's funny because like the way I think about business today, even the business I'm in today, Basecamp, I just see it as a continuation of when I was 13 selling knives. Honestly, like it's all one business where I'm buying or making the thing that I want, and then finding other people who want the same thing. It's the same business as it ever was when I was 13 and is today. I'm not selling illegal stuff now, but other than that, same spirit. And anyway, so I got in trouble. I don't remember what, I got in trouble probably before that too, but my parents let me get away with a lot as an only child. So I think they'd let me get away with an extra amount of stuff. But those early days, I think, paved the way for me to really learn how to sell things, how to market things, how to promote things, how to package things, how to mark things up, and how to also charge for things, which is in a strange way the thing that's so deficient about our industry today, the tech industry, which is like a lot of people a lot of companies don't charge for anything. They give stuff away for free, and then they have to live with all these other the negatives of that, which we're even seeing play out in the news, now. So anyway, I learned a lot of lessons from doing the wrong thing, let's say.
You mentioned a bunch of weird things happened. We don't necessarily have to go into that, although I'm certainly happy to.
I'll go into one of them. Let's do it.
Yeah, because I'm curious. And then you're like, I got it out of my system. I'm like, well, for a lot of people, they never quite get it out of their system. So there had to be, I would imagine, a catalyzing event or events or something that encouraged you to get
there
it out.
Was.
So let's go into one.
There was and there were. So first of all, I had this friend, I won't mention his name, but he was a bad influence on me. My parents spotted him immediately, said, this kid's no good. We don't want you to be with this kid. But anyway, I still was because he was cool and I wanted to be cool. Anyway, one day during lunch, we put like a Tic Tac, like a mint. It wasn't a Tic Tac, but it was some sort of mint in this other kid's milk, at school. And after he drank his milk, we told him, this is, again, I'm so ashamed of this whole thing. But anyway, we told him that we poisoned him, right? Right. Bad. I mean, it's bad. This is bad shit.
And how old are you? You're 15?
I was 15 or something like that.
Yeah,
14,
this
15.
is kind of, I mean, I hate to say it, not to excuse it, but sort of par for the course 15-year-old boy behavior.
Yeah, it was shitty, but I'm just being honest. So we did that. We obviously didn't poison anybody, but like we told him we did, okay? And it's funny because it wasn't a bullying thing. He was actually a friend of ours. So it wasn't like we were picking on anybody. He was like a friend of ours, and we did this. Anyway, in math class later that day, he passes out because he was probably anxious and thought that we poisoned him. So he has to get his stomach pumped because he thought he told the teachers, then the police got involved that he'd been poisoned, and I had to go down to the police station. My parents had to take me to the police station. And all this shit, and it was like it was a mint, but we set this up in a way where he didn't think it was. And so anyway, that was some of the shit I got into, and eventually I got into that and a couple other things. Eventually, my parents said, "Hey, look, enough. If you get in trouble again, we're sending you off to boarding school, which means you're away from all your friends and you're away from us and the whole thing." And it was that statement alone that changed everything for me. I don't know why either. I didn't even know what boarding school was. It probably sounded kind of cool. Like I get to go away and sleep away. Like there's something kind of almost cool about it in a sense, like when you don't really know what it would be. But they said it in such a stern way that it was so clear that this was not where I wanted to go and where I wanted to be.
Right. The tone made it clear it was not desirable for you.
Yes. And that was the moment when I basically I went back to my old friends who were awesome. I never really left them, but I kind of sort of did. And they were very cool about it, and they kind of welcomed me back, basically. And I just stopped doing all that shit. I just stopped it. And it sounds like how could I have just stopped it? But it's probably because I wasn't really. It was sort of this stunt that I was pulling, and not really what I wanted to do. It was just kind of a fun thing. When I realized that there were consequences, and once I realized there were true consequences, I changed it. And I think that was kind of the thing for me is that, especially when I was younger, I would sort of do things. I remember so I went to Hebrew school, like after school, and I hated it, absolutely hated it, because it was like 2 hours, Tuesdays and Thursdays after school. I wasn't religious. My parents weren't really either, but it was just sort of something that everyone in the neighborhood did. And I kind of did. And it was out of respect for my grandparents who were more religious. Anyway, so I went to this thing like 2 days a week after school. And I remember my dad telling me once that because I was kind of bad there too. I was extra bad there. I would always question the teachers, well, wait, prove it. Can you prove that God exists? Like stuff like that. I was just being an asshole, And because I was just pushing them because I knew you couldn't prove it, and I was just and so that was just being difficult. Anyway, I got in trouble, and my dad.
That's so surprising to hear.
Right. Right. And so my dad's like, he's like, you shouldn't do this, but I just want you to know, none of this goes on your record. The record I don't know if you ever threatened with your record.
Sure. Yeah.
And I always found this.
I didn't have a exactly pristine record as a kid. So right. Yes, I had the record.
And there is no record. That's the thing. But I didn't know it at the time until my dad's like, this isn't going to go on your record. And that actually made me do more bad shit. And eventually I got kicked out of Hebrew school for doing some other stuff, which I really don't go into.
Gross insubordination.
Yeah, basically. And they just had enough of me, and they knew I had enough of them and the whole thing. And they let me go through and get my bar mitzvah, and they let me do that, but they're like, just don't come to school anymore, okay? So that was fun.
Creative differences.
Yeah, basically, exactly. So anyway, all those things, at some point, my parents kind of said boarding school or stop for this, and I stopped. And back then as high school kids do, you drink a bit, and this, I got that all out of my system also. All that stuff I kind of got out of my system. And that's kind of one of the reasons I didn't really like college, because in college, everyone was experimenting with stuff for the first time in a sense. I feel like I'd already been through all that. And so the social experience in college was actually really boring for me and almost felt childish, actually, because I felt like I'd been through it when I was a child, and now I see everyone else doing that. And so I didn't really enjoy college at all for that reason. And I just sort of kind of muddled through and got it done. And then by that point, I was already doing website design, freelance. I had a software business that I'd already started on the side, selling software that I'd made to organize my own music collection. And all this stuff I started doing. And to me, college was actually just getting in the way of me getting out there and doing the things that I really wanted to do.
So you mentioned organizing your music collection, and we could dig into that. I remember reading a story about it. People could send you in $20 to get audio file, right? That you would upload to AOL. And so I read the story of getting this. You were getting this envelope from Germany or some other country, the airmail envelope that I'm sure some people have seen with the red and blue around the edges. And lo and behold, right? Order form, $20 bill, big deal. Was that the first time that you were like, holy shit, I could do this, or I'm an entrepreneur, or I'm successful? Do you remember of these many entrepreneurial experiments and ventures that you've been involved with? Was there a particular incident that stands out wow, holy shit, this is something that I could actually make a living doing? I could do this. Yeah,
well, first of all, I never thought about making a living really, but I thought about what was different about the software, getting $20 in the mail for software that I made, was that it was the first time I realized. Actually, let me step back. I've been selling stuff before, right? We talked about that, like throwing stars and sorts of that shit. But I had to do work for that. Like I had to work. I had to make a sale each time. I had to get inventory each time. I would sell inventory. I have to get more inventory. I have to go out and convince my friends to buy more shit, right? What was different about the software thing was that I could make this thing once. I could put it out there into the world, and a lot of people could pay me for it. And I could, in a sense, make money while I was sleeping. I didn't think about it necessarily that way. I do, like, I can look back on it now and say that's what I felt. I didn't feel it that way. But what I did realize was that I could make something that I wanted. I could put a lot of effort into it and put it out there and let it speak for itself. And if people liked it, they'd be happy to pay for it. And that people are happy to pay for things. And that, like, I don't have to go out and sell each one. I could put it up and people could buy it from all over the world when they find it on their own. That was, I think, the distinctly different thing for me at that moment versus everything else I'd done in the past was sort of one-off sales, including, like, you know, eventually I was doing some like logo design and website design, which came a little bit later after. Well, actually, I'm not sure what the timeline was, but even that you have to find a client every time, and you got to find someone new every time, and the whole thing. And software was different, and that's what I do today. Is I make software, we put it out there, and technically you're making money while you're sleeping because it's running and people pay you on a monthly basis, and you kind of make it once and put it out there versus, although of course you're making it every day, you're changing it and tweaking it, but it's, still the same spirit. So that was the big change for me, I think. And then, I realized that the deeper realization though, again, is that like, I can make this for myself. I can satisfy myself, and that then the next step is to find other people like you versus trying to dominate an industry. And I think this is a fundamental thing that we have today at Basecamp, which is I have no interest, DHH and I talk about this stuff, we have no interest in dominating anyone or anything. We don't I'm not out for land grab. I don't know what our market share is. I could care less. It doesn't matter to me. None of this stuff, I'm not looking to put any competitors out of business. I'm not looking to be number one. None of that stuff matters. What matters is, can I make something that I like? Can we put it out there to support our costs and make more money than we spend? And if that means we have 1% market share or 0.1% market share, fine with me. I don't care. If it means we have 50% market share, fine with me. I don't care. None of that matters. What matters is, can I build something I like, and can it be sustainable, and can it fund our continued development and endeavors? And that's, I'll start with the music thing because I made it for myself. I was loaning out my CDs and tapes to friends and never getting them back, and I forgot who I loaned them to. And so I'm like, well, maybe if I organize this, I could like have an inventory of all the stuff I have, bootlegs and CDs and the whole thing. And then whenever I loan one out to someone, I'll just like note the date and who it was, and then I'll build a system that will send me a reminder about that 30 days later. And I can go, hey, Bill, remember that CD that I let you have? I said I need this weekend. Like, I still don't have it. And then I would get all my stuff back. And so, that's kind of what I've been doing ever since is building stuff that works for me.
So I want to tell a story through your words about how the world welcomed you with open arms and immediately started buying everything that you had to sell. So I'd like to read a bit of text here.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure this is not a misquote since you typed it out and sent it to me some time ago. Here we go. Way back in the 90s when I was getting started as a web designer, I sent my work into an award site called highfive.com. At the time, it was the shit. If you were awarded a high five award, you were recognized. Now, I sent my stuff in, and I'm going to leave his name out just so I don't have anybody chasing me around. The guy who ran it emailed me back. I don't have the original email anymore, but basically he told me I sucked. I had no business being in the web design business and that I should never email him again. That rejection filled me with so much fire. Not anger, not resentment, not disappointment, but fire. Fire to kick ass and prove his impression wrong. I loved the rejection. It made me. And that was in response to a question I asked you, which was, how has a failure or apparent failure set you up for later success? That was in my last book, Tribe of Mentors. And my question about this, and you can certainly take this anywhere you want, if you want to elaborate, correct, do anything else. But my question, speaking personally, as someone who has struggled with anger, I mean, I spent so much of my childhood being bullied really badly. I was born premature, really, really small, and with a lot of health issues up until about 6th grade, that I built up this anger that I used as fuel to then later compete and fight and do all of these things so that I wouldn't be taken advantage of again, effectively, right? I mean, there was just a coping mechanism. And now I've realized that anger is very often not helpful, and that it is the acid that damages the vessel, not that which it is poured upon, right? So the line, I'll read it again, that rejection filled me with so much fire, not anger, not resentment, not disappointment, but fire. What was the self-talk that made it fire and not anger or resentment, if that makes any sense? Or how do you transmute what could be a negative response into something that's actually helpful in a case like this?
Yeah, I remember that distinctly because it was the first time I got enough courage up to sort of submit work to a award site thing. And the rejection was so in your face, like, you suck, basically, don't do this. Because it was almost a caricature of a rejection. Like, to actually have someone be like, you suck, don't do this. Like, no one would ever say that, but he did. It almost made me laugh and be like, I'm just going to prove you wrong. It was that kind of energy. That was the fire. Like, I've always, in those cases, I've always responded to those sorts of moments as motivation to prove somebody wrong, or to, like, prove myself right, maybe. And maybe that's sort of a bit of the flaw I still have to work out, or one of those two. But I just wanted to say, okay, well, fuck you. I'm going to show you that I can do this. And I don't even know. I shouldn't even care, right? Like, now I realize that this is, again, like, my reaction to someone. Like, who cares about this guy? Who cares what he thinks about my work? It's also tied to the fact that, like, I know, look, obviously I come from a position of privilege to say this whole thing, but, like, I don't let people offend me. And I have been in situations where, like, for example, I mentioned earlier, I'm Jewish. I remember in college, some people called me a kike, which is a fucking horrible slur. And I've had people, like, I've walked by a penny and they're like, oh, you should pick that up. Like, I've had some of that shit, right? And it's like, it doesn't matter. I don't care. Like, to me, that kind of stuff just has never upset me, because it's like, that's just a reflection on the other person's ignorance or point of view. I've never let that kind of stuff get to me. And I think that,
is that something your parents instilled in you? I mean, that's not the most common reaction.
Yeah, I don't know where it came from. I don't know where that came from, but I've never remembered ever feeling offended by anyone's sort of slight at me for whatever reason. And, like, look, I'm 5'7", so I'm a relatively short guy. Like, there's been those kinds of things that you have. Like, there's all sorts of stuff that you get, and I know a lot of people have it way fucking worse than I do. So I totally get all of that. I'm just using, like, look, the only examples I have are my own, right? And so, but I've been in those situations where I could see someone flipping over it and be like, what the fuck? That's a horrible thing to say. And, well, how could you ever say that to somebody? And I've just never felt that way. I've been like, okay, that's where you come from. Fine. That's fine. Like, I don't really even have the energy or the care to try and set you right or whatever. It's not my job. I don't really want to do it. It is what it is. It kind of just bounces off me in a sense. But one reaction I have had is motivation. That's the thing that I've always had when someone says I can't do something, or I'm not this enough, or I'm not that enough. It's motivation to prove that wrong. And I don't know if it's the dark and dirty side of it is, like, is it actually revenge or is it motivation? And I'm not sure that I necessarily know what that is. Maybe I think it's motivation, but maybe it's more revenge, which is a pretty crappy emotion, or whatever that would be called. But I never do it trying to hurt somebody. So maybe it is motivation, not revenge, but I'm not totally sure, to be honest. But I don't know where it came from. But I just never remember ever being angry about something that someone said about me or how they've judged me or whatever. I just never really cared.
Well, to maybe provide a contrast to that, it seems like you have an abhorrence for wasting time. You have a strong,
Yes.
It seems like you have a strong dislike for wasting time, and you've talked about this before, written about it. What rules for yourself, commandments, systems, anything do you have in place to help minimize time wasting?
So something I think I mentioned, I wrote this up in your book actually as a response, is sort of, first of all, getting better at saying no is the critical thing to begin with, and being honest about the things you really want to do and things you really don't want to do, and not sort of just doing things because you feel obligated because it'll make someone else feel good. Like, who knows how someone else is actually going to feel? It's sort of presumptuous to suggest that I should do something because it'll make someone else happy. It's actually kind of hard to know what makes people happy, and so I try not to. I try not to go down that road, because I think you can find yourself in a difficult spot, and it's really hard to do. So I've just tried to get better at saying no and really recognizing the things I like to do and I don't like to do. I've kind of described my life as it's a weird description of my life, but partial description of my life is like, I just try to do everything I can to avoid hassles. I don't like hassles. And to me, a hassle is like something I don't want to do in the future. It's almost never something I have to do now. It's something I have to do in the future. And so something I've been getting better and better at is basically just being honest with people who ask me to do things far, far in advance, and say, I can't make commitments that far in advance. I know that you need a commitment that far in advance. So you're planning an event or you're doing, I totally understand that. But I find that I tend to, this is a strong word and it's not fair to what other people are doing. So it's going to come off strange, but I don't think of it in terms of that what they're about to do isn't worth it. But I tend to regret things that I say yes to far in advance, not because of the thing itself, but because it actually prevents me from having opportunities to explore other things in the moment when I get there that I might be more interested in doing. So this comes back to the goal setting, perhaps. Maybe it's all the same thing, which is that I don't know how I'm going to feel 6 months from now on Friday night at 4:00, speaking, where I'm scheduled to speak at an event. Maybe I'd rather not be doing that 6 months from now. The only way I'm going to know that is to basically wait until that moment and decide whether or not I want to do that. But of course, I can't cancel on people if I booked events. So I've just found in my life that the things I put on my calendar, because it's so easy to put something far in advance on your calendar because it costs nothing in a sense. It doesn't take any of your time now. It doesn't take any of your time next week. It's like, 4 months from now, sure, I'll do that. And then it comes up on that. And I'm like, I wish I wouldn't have said yes to that. Not because of the thing itself, but because of the feeling of being now obligated to do something that I may not choose to want to have done in that moment had I had the choice then or now.
Can you give us some sample language or just a basic kind of template that you would use to politely decline something? Somebody hits you up. Let's just say you actually know them. They're like, hey, 6 months from now on such and such a date, we're having this event. ABC impressive speakers are coming. Would love that, blah, blah, blah. Right? So then What does your response look like?
Well, I mean, sometimes I will say yes, but most of the time I'll say, thanks for writing. I appreciate the invitation. I can't book anything that far in advance right now. I have a hard time filling my calendar 6 months ahead of time or something like that. Let me think about the language. Basically, I would say, I can't book anything that far in advance. Sometimes it's because I'll be specific, like my wife is pregnant and that's too close, so I can't do that. But there's other times I'm just like, I just can't book that far in advance. If there's an opening closer and you need someone, like, let me know then. I'd be happy to do it, or perhaps another time. But 6 months from now is just too far out for me to book things, is kind of what I'll say. I always try to, first of all, it's an honor to be invited to anything. The fact that anyone wants to hear me talk is still surprises me. So I always appreciate it. And I'm sure I always make sure to lead with that. But then I'm honest about it, which is I can't put anything on my calendar that far in advance. I can't book things that far in advance. Also, another thing, like, for example, I've been asked a lot recently to speak internationally, and I'll just tell people, which is true, like I just don't like to travel internationally for business. If I want to go somewhere, I'd like to go somewhere because for personal reasons, but I don't like to travel internationally for business. So I'll just say I'm just not traveling internationally for business right now. It's not something I'm really doing. So I appreciate the invitation again. If you ever have an event in the United States, let me know, that kind of stuff. Because I think if you just make up stories, it's just why not just be honest and clear about it? And people are very understanding, actually. They go, I totally get that. Hey, if we have an opening, I'll let you know. If not, no big deal. Maybe another time. Maybe there's some other thing we'll have coming up that's sooner. I said, yeah, of course. Let me know if something's sooner. That'd be great. So I kind of do it that way. And by the way, this I was sort of inspired by, and I don't know if this is true. I read somewhere that Warren Buffett kind of does this with meetings. I don't know I don't know if this is true. I read it, which is that if you want to meet with him, you basically have to write his assistant or whatever the day before. So if you write, I'm sure there's exceptions to this rule, but in most cases, if you want to meet with him, you can't say, hey, I'd like to meet with, I'm going to be in Omaha in March 22nd. Can I meet up with Mr. Buffett or something? And the answer would be, when you get in on the 21st, email me then. And if he has any openings the next day, then he'd be happy to meet with you. And now, of course, he's Warren Buffett. People have written about this. People are like, oh, he's Warren Buffett. Like, the thing is that, yeah, he is Warren Buffett, but you are you. And your time is yours, just like his is his, and his attention is his, and yours is yours. And who cares how wealthy he is? What does that have to do with any of this? Who cares what position he's in? I understand that, he is in a position where he can maybe say no more frequently than others, but so can a lot of people. I don't think people give themselves enough credit and give no enough credit and defend their own attention and time as much as they should. People will protect money. They'll protect all sorts of things, but they won't protect their attention and their time. And I think more people should get better at that. So I've been practicing getting better at that. And it was sort of inspired in part by hearing about, if it's true or not, I don't know, but hearing about how Buffett does that.
And how people respond to the boundaries that you set, particularly if you do so tactfully, tells you quite a lot about the nature of your true relationship.
That's true too.
With these people. I remember one time I was going through a very difficult period and was trying to set up a number of different rules to simplify and clear my calendar. And it also just took me a long time to get back to people, even people I cared quite a lot about. But the people who are really close to me know that is the case. Who knows? I could be lost in the Amazon jungle for 3 weeks. Like, they don't get too upset about things. And at one point, I got an angry text from this more of an acquaintance, a very powerful guy. And he was like, Tim, dude, what the hell? Like, you're harder to get a hold of than the president. I just talked to him last week or something like that. Right. And then we hopped on the phone and he was really upset. And I said, well, the president has a bigger team than I do. And number one. And number two, I hate to say it, but you're being really aggressive right now. Of all the things on my list of priorities, including my family and this, and I mentioned a few things that were pretty heavy, you're kind of number 17 right now. And that doesn't mean that you're unimportant to me, but it means that you just have to wait until I'm done with the first 16. So if you can't do that, I get it, I suppose, but it's not going to change. And it's definitely a learned skill. I've absolutely, and you've maybe had this experience, but when my first book came out, I was so absolutely astonished that anyone would pay me anything to talk about anything, that I said yes to everything that came in. And then 6 months later, I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm in Death of a Salesman. This is awful. Yeah. And over time, I've become better at setting parameters. Now, you've mentioned, since we're talking about Warren Buffett, clear thinking and clear writing, which you seem to value very highly. And in doing a little bit of homework for this conversation, I've read, and you can tell me if this is true or still the case, but how one of your top hiring criteria is whether the person is a great writer, whether the person can communicate well in written form. I'd love for you to say whether that is still the case or not, and why that is the case.
Yeah, it's definitely the case. It's sort of been the case forever for us. It's the case because, first of all, most communication is written these days. And first of all, let me step back. Like, we're a remote company, so especially most communication is written. If you're in a local company and you're having meetings all the time, sometimes verbal is enough. But in most cases, people are writing more and more and more than they ever have before. And one of the most costly and inefficient things is having to repeat yourself or answer questions about something that should have been clear in the first place. It's really quickly. If you can't communicate clearly, you're communicating probably 3 or 4 times more frequently than you need to. And that can be really inefficient and really frustrating, extremely frustrating. So we've always looked at writing as like clear writing as a prerequisite for every position we have at the company, because everybody's supposed to communicate with themselves, with the rest of the company, with their team, and most of it's done via written word. And we also, for example, the first sort of gatekeeper of it is the cover letter. So when people apply for a job, if they just like send a resume or whatever, they're out instantly. That's not even something we look at. I always want to see a cover letter of some sort. It can just be an email, of course, with an attachment of the resume or whatever. But I want to see how you open the conversation. You know, how do you describe yourself? Why are you applying for this job and not just any job? And you can tell very quickly if someone can explain themselves, if someone can advocate for themselves and advocate for their ideas and their position and who they are and why they should work here. If they're clear-minded, if they're friendly, like all that stuff comes through in writing. I think if you pay enough attention to the words, you can see a lot of that. Also, for example, when I hire designers, I look at their design, but I look at their writing almost a little bit more. Whenever we hire a designer, when we get down to the last 5 candidates that we really think could be finalists, we hire them to do a project for us, $1,500 for a week, and they do a project for us so we can kind of see their actual work. But even more importantly is we ask them to write up why they did what they did, because there's a lot of great designers out there, but people have to advocate for themselves. And so I want to see why they did what they did. I want to hear not hear, but read their point of view and their line of thinking and how they came up with the solutions. And that helps me, when I read that, helps me understand what would be like to work with that person for real. Are they able to explain why they did what they did? Are they glossing over little details that actually matter? Like, what is it? How do they see their work, and how do they write about it? It's a very important part of the job here at Basecamp. So so writing's important in every position. It doesn't matter what position you're in. You still have to be a great writer. We typically start by looking at the cover letter. The actual like work assignments to get hired here typically involve writing, no matter what the position. And I just think it's always proven in our case to be a really good indicator of someone's success here. Whenever we hire someone, we're like, I don't know, there's just the writing wasn't quite right. It almost always pans out that it turns out that they're not the right fit for the company, even if their work was great, but they're just unable to really convince people and persuade people based on their sort of a missing bit of, it's not magic, but I'll call it that, in the writing where you read something, oh, this is great.
I'd love to dig a little deeper on the example you gave with the design finalists. Let's say you're hiring for a position, you have a handful of folks, you've narrowed it down to, and you're going to pay each of them $1,500 for a 1-week project. Do you assign them a project? Give them a range of projects? I'd love a little bit more in terms of specifics. And then when you ask them, like, why did you do what you did, what you ended up doing? Yeah. Do you provide them with guidelines for how to answer that, or do you keep it totally open-ended? I'd love for you just to walk us through a hypothetical or real example of what the project could look like and how it unfolds from there.
Yeah, and first of all, the reason why we do that is because you basically can't trust anyone's design work in the past. And the reason why is because a lot of people work with other people, and you don't really know what they did. Like we'll get resumes like I did Nike.com. It's like, no, you didn't. Like you worked on Nike.com. I can't tell what you did exactly. And so you'll see a lot of that, or you'll see people share screenshots with you of things, and you're like, I just don't know the process that went into that. So it's hard for me to judge it. And it's not that I don't think the work's good or bad. It's none of that. It's like, I just don't know what I'm evaluating here. So the idea is that once we get down to the 5 finalists, after looking at work and looking at writing and the whole thing, we feel like these 5 people could be great fits for this particular position. We give them all the same assignment, and the assignment is, sometimes there's actually sometimes there is a choice, like 2 or 3 different assignments, but for the most part, historically, it's been 1. Lately, we've been doing a few, but it's been 1, where everybody who's applying for this job does the same project. Everyone gets a week to do it. They have to figure out how to fit that in with the rest of their most people have jobs already, so they maybe have to work at night or whenever they do it. And we're I'm well aware of the fact that they don't have a lot of time, so I'm not expecting perfection. This is part of the reason why I look at the writing and the explanation of the work, because I recognize that, who knows? Maybe you have a full-time job, maybe you have kids at home, maybe you don't, maybe whatever it is, maybe you only have an hour a day to do this on the side and you're already tired. I get all of that. So I'm more interested in how you approach the project and how you describe what you did and why you did it. So anyway, they would do, for example, we take a screen from Basecamp and say, so to get really specific about this, like here's the way you add people to a Basecamp project. What would you do to make this better? Now, you have no data. You're not talking to anybody about it. I just want to know what you would do. Like what would you do? Because a lot of the work at Basecamp is all based on what would you do. We don't do a lot of user testing. We do use customer interviews and stuff, but we don't get into a testing lab. We don't watch people use our product. We don't do any of that. So, and we don't really look that much at like usage data to really determine what we're going to do. So a lot of this is about gut and feel and what would you do? What's wrong with this screen in your opinion? I'm really interested in people's opinions. I want people to have a point of view when I hire them. I don't want people to say, well, I need this data and that data to make decisions. I go, I get all that. But what would you do? I want to know I'm hiring you. What would you do? So anyway, so they do the work and then they present it. And I say, present it any way you want. So there are no guidelines. I just say, present it any way you want. But I guess the one guideline is like, I want to understand why you did what you did. So some people present this work as like an elaborate website with a bunch of different screens. Some people present it as a PDF, a static PDF. Some people write something up and sort of tell a linear story with screenshots interspersed. There's a variety of different ways people do it. But ultimately, I'm looking at the explanation of the work and the sort of the thought behind the ideas that are presented. That's what I'm most curious about. It's not necessarily whether or not the work is great, because you're already a finalist, so I already know that you're capable of designing things well. What I want to make sure I understand is where the ideas are coming from, how they're filtering through your head, how they're filtering through your fingers into the design itself, and why you did what you did, and can you defend it? One of the things is even when I agree with the solution, I'm always going to push back on it in these kind of situations, because I want to see how people take criticism as well. That's a big part of this, which is like constructive criticism and critique. I want to see that. One of the things we don't do and we don't believe in at all are like these riddles and this bullshit test crap. Right? It's not
the McKinsey, how many golf balls can you fit in a 747 type stuff?
I'm interested because like everything we try to do at Basecamp is about real stuff. So like this is actually a real project that we would take on. It's not bullshit and it's real. So that's the riddles and stuff. Forget it. So real work. I want to see how you explain it, what you do with it, why you did what you did with it, and then I'm going to push back on it and see how you respond with it. And that says a lot. One of the designers we hired recently for iOS, Tara Mann is her name. And one of the things I was really impressed with when she delivered her project and we started talking about it was that when we were going through it, she goes, I don't even know if I like what I did here. And I loved that because that shows, first of all, a real sense of confidence in like talking to an employer and going, I don't even know if I liked what I did here. Like that's, most people are like, this is the best thing in the world. This is the best idea ever. Like this is, but she's like, I think I like it, but I'm not totally sure. And I like that. We dug into that. And then we got into like why she didn't think it was great. And that was just a very real conversation that I felt like I could work with someone like this. Absolutely. Because they don't think that everything they do is going to be great, and they're self-aware enough to recognize that, and we can talk it through and figure it out. And that was a great thing. So there could have been, for example, in this case there weren't, but there could have been 5 designers who were better than her visually anyway. I still would have gone with her because of her approach to the work and her honesty about it. That's what I'm looking for when I talk to somebody who I'm about to hire.
What would be an example of pushing back? But let's just create a hypothetical or a real example.
Yeah.
And then what would trip the wire as far as red flags go, or positive indicators?
Sure. So I can't really, it's hard to describe that particular project because we'd all have to be looking at it to point out the.
Yeah, it could be anything. I'm just wondering. In other words, is pushback like, wow, I think this really sucks. What say you?
Not like that.
Or is it like, not sure how I feel about that? Or is it, something else?
Yeah, it's more obviously the latter. I don't ever say anything sucks.
I was using that just because of the rejection.
I get it. Yeah, totally. Yeah, right. The 5-5 thing too. No, it's more. I'm not sure that I see why you went down this road, or doesn't this seem like a lot of steps, or this. Why this word save, maybe it should be preview. Like, why is it save? Like, I kind of throw usually pushbacks with questions. Like, I don't understand this, or help me understand this. And that's kind of the real one I like to use. Which is like, help. I'm not sure I get this. Can you help me understand this? But sometimes the red flags are very clear. People hunch down into a defensive posture and fight for their idea, which is fine. It's good to do that sometimes, but not when it's like, help me understand why you went this direction. It's like, I went this direction because I felt like it was the best possible thing. Like, there's some sort of, when people get rushed about things, I actually like when someone takes a pause and goes, let me think about that. Well, here's what I went through to get to here. Like, the reason I used the word save was because this reason or that reason, or the reason I called it a draft and not a preview is because of this and that. I'm more interested in people retracing their steps than just sort of purely explaining the outcome. That's not really that's kind of a deeper thing, but you'll see people in design reviews who get very defensive very quickly, and they you can tell that they're not listening anymore. They're just they're telling you what they want you to listen to instead of listening to what you have to say. That's very obvious in design reviews. When that comes up, it's very clear. So it's that, but I just fundamentally, I'm looking for a deep degree of introspection in the work and an understanding of how they ended up there. It's kind of like if you think about back in school where your teacher would ask you to show the work when you did a math problem. What they're basically looking for is they're looking to see if you understand how you came out with the answer versus like, did you somehow memorize this or guess? It's like, or was it lucky? Or did you actually understand how you arrived there? It's kind of the same thing. I want people to show their work basically. And that doesn't mean showing like all the drafts of the design work necessarily. It's not like going through previous versions. It's again, coming down to explaining the path that they took to land where they landed. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. Yep. And this is also with the understanding that very different company from Basecamp, but I've spent a lot of time with Matt Mullenweg of Automatic, which runs WordPress.com, among other things. And he values written communication exceptionally highly. And they do all of their interviews via text. And also have at least for a long period, up until maybe, I want to say at least 50 or 100 employees, had every prospective employee knew they would have to spend, and I don't know if this is part of the vetting process or post-hiring, a week or two handling customer service.
Yeah.
And which also, not to say it's perfect for every company, certainly, but also tells you a lot more than just how they handle a user error in a customer service situation, right? If they refuse to do that, what does that tell you, right? If they do it poorly, what does it tell you? There's a lot more than just the words that come out of them.
Yeah, and actually at our company, everybody works customer service also. So no matter what position you're in, every single person rotates one day through customer service every number of days. Like we have 54 employees in the company, about 15 or 16 on customer support. So about 30 of us every 30 days we rotate through and do one day of customer service. And that's another reason why it's important for you to be able to write, is because on that one day a month or one day every 40 days or whatever, you are on the front lines speaking with customers and empathizing with them, understanding what they're dealing with, helping them understand what they don't understand, helping us understand what we don't understand, all of that stuff, which is what customer service is really all about. Of course, it's also about like troubleshooting and solving immediate problems, but a lot of it too is getting to the real, like what are they really asking for and why, and what are we doing wrong and what are our blind spots? It's all that stuff. And a lot of that comes down to having a conversation with the customer, and all of our customer service is done via email or Twitter or chat or something. So we don't have a phone, although we do some phone support, but we don't have a phone number that you can call in, for example. So it's all written. So we want to make sure that if we're going to put someone in front of customers, they know how to write as well. So that is a big part of it too. I didn't know that Automattic did that as part of their hiring process, but I love the idea.
Yeah, it's such a key skill for so many reasons. For people who want to become better writers, better communicators, are there any books, resources, exercises that you would recommend?
There is one of my favorite books is called Revising Prose, and the cover is horrible. It's like
that's how you can spot it.
Yes. It's like a CD-ROM and a pencil or something. It's like, what? I don't even understand how that happened. Maybe they've revised it since, but I think it's that bad still. It's so horrible. Anyway, Revising Prose.
Thank God the title is so catchy.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Right. But what's cool about it is that, and I forget the author, and you can look it up and put it in the notes, but is that he dissects things one sentence at a time, and his ability to take a sentence and cut it up and explain it and simplify it. I think it's a wonderful skill and a great book. So it's not really even about writing paragraphs or stories or how to organize and outline stuff. It's like a sentence at a time and figuring out how to structure things. Love it. Great book. And it's actually, there's this class I've talked about before. I've written a blog post about this class that I'd want to teach. If I ever taught a college class, I think one of the biggest disservices that college does actually is that it doesn't teach people to write well. In fact, it teaches a lot of people, especially in MBA programs, to write very poorly.
It's so true. It's so true.
And a lot of it's based on length, like write a 10-page thing or whatever. So the class I always wanted to teach, if I was ever to teach, would be a writing class. I don't care what the subject is. Doesn't matter. Pick a subject. I want you to write like a 5-page version of that article. I want you to write a 1-page version of it. I want you to write a 5-paragraph version, a 5-sentence version, and a 1-sentence version. That's the assignment. And we would do that over and over and over and over with different topics. I don't care the topic. It doesn't matter. I just want you to be able to write at different levels of resolution and continue to clarify it as you cut things out to the point where you can write it in 1 sentence. And of course, there'll be more detail in the 5-paragraph version. Maybe it was 3 pages, 1 page, 3 paragraphs, 1 sentence, whatever it is. But this idea of going from writing the long piece and then cutting it down and editing. Editing is something that's rarely taught. And really trying to hone in on what it is and realize, and like the big idea here is that you can realize that so much of the stuff that you put in the 5-page version just doesn't really matter that much. And actually the 1-page version is probably better. And maybe the 3-paragraph version is much better than the 1-page version. And there's probably a point where you begin to lose it, but it's still the great exercise. So I'd love to see that kind of writing instruction versus length, which sent like long things, and then not actually editing. This is the other thing that blows me away about education. It's funny. I was talking to my sons in preschool, and I was talking to the head of the school about this. And the thing that's not taught in schools is iteration. And iteration is everything outside of school. Where you do something and then like you launch it or ship it or whatever, and then you're on to making a better version of that thing pretty quickly. In school, we would always do something and sort of hand it in, and that assignment would be done. And then you go on and do another assignment. You never get to revisit things. In the professional world, you're revisiting things all the time. And I would love to see, you hand something in this 1 page to 5 page to 1 page to 5 paragraphs, whatever. That's a version of a short-term version of like revisioning in a sense. Perhaps the better way of doing that would be you first hand in the 5-page version, you get it back with notes, then you're required to write the 1-page version of that. But anyway, the point is that being able to revisit something that you did and make it better and hand it in and revise it again and hand it in and revise it again is something that you don't see often. Sometimes you see that with drafts in a document, but it's not really quite the same as being able to come back to the idea. So for example, if you're doing something in school and you're building something or you're doing a science project or whatever, and you do it and you're done, you present it and it's over, like maybe a month later, you're going to have a better idea for something that you did. And you go, I want to do that again. But school doesn't give you a chance to do anything again, really, unless you're stupid and you're held back and they say you can't go for further. Of course, not stupid. That's the wrong word. But like the school's like, you didn't hit the criteria. So we're going to let you do it again. Like in some ways, of course, there's a lot of other reasons why this probably isn't necessarily a good thing for people, for kids. But to get a chance to do it all over again, maybe you see it better the second time. So anyway, I would love to see revision and iteration built into education. And this sort of writing assignment is sort of a way to get at that.
And I pulled up this book, and the cover is truly awful. Like, what is the CD even doing there? On top,
how did that happen? Is it like just clip art or something? Like, I don't even know how that happened. I'd love to get to the bottom of that.
But revising prose, Richard A. Lanham. Does that sound right?
I think so. Yeah,
it's got to be because the cover is this pen and a CD on top of a page with a bunch of markups on it. Richard A. Lanham. Another book that I found very helpful. I haven't read it in a very long time, but it's called Simple and Direct. It should be fairly easy to write. I don't remember the name of the author, and I had the great good fortune. Maybe too many modifiers on that, but now that I'm thinking about writing, the great good helpful fortune of taking a class in college. I was at Princeton undergrad with John McPhee, who's a senior writer at the New Yorker. He's won a Pulitzer or two at this point. And the course was called The Literature of Fact. It was about nonfiction writing, creative nonfiction, which doesn't mean making up 50%. It means taking fact and weaving it into a narrative, which John McPhee is exceptionally good at. And actually, one book that I think you would really enjoy is called Draft Number 4, which is about his writing process. I think you'd be fascinated by it from a structural standpoint. Really fascinating, and it gets into the weeds, which is not for everybody, but I think I think you'd appreciate it. And I remember the first time the first time we had our writing assignments returned to us. So every week we had a seminar, which was about 12 students or so. We had to apply to get in. A writing assignment, and then a one-on-one session with McPhee to go over the writing assignment that he had already marked up and given to us. And I remember when he handed back the first writing assignment, to all these students. And before he handed them out, he said, look, he didn't say look because that's not what he would say, but he said, I want you to know that you're all good writers. You can all write. So I don't want you to be intimidated by what I'm about to hand back. And so he gave us back. You just saw student by student, their faces drop, and I got mine back. And there was more red ink on the page than black ink that I typed out. It really looked like there was more red ink. And it became so clear how fuzzy so much of my thinking was, how many unnecessary words there were, how much gristle and fat there was in between the actual meat that was necessary on the page. And the reason I bring up this story is that over the course of the next few weeks, as we were learning more, practicing more, and honing the sharpness of our writing, getting progressively less red ink, ideally, my grades in all of my other classes went up. And there was a very clear, super clear correlation between cleaning up my thinking and everything else running more smoothly. It was really, it could not have been more obvious. And such an incredibly valuable skill.
It is. Something that I would also encourage people to do is to read Tom Petty lyrics. It sounds weird. But if you read Tom Petty has such a wonderful efficiency in his storytelling and his lyrics. And every word really counts, and there's no filler. And he paints these really broad pictures with 4 or 5 words per phrase, and really, truly is, I thought, one of the best songwriters, of course, but really a great writer in general when you read the lyrics. So I would look at that and go, look at the pictures he can paint and the emotions he can evoke and the story he can tell with very few words. He's extremely economical with his language, or was, and it's a great thing to read. So just go look at some of his albums, go look up the lyrics online, and don't even listen to the songs, but just read them, and you go, I see where he's going with this. And it's I always enjoy doing that from time to time. He's just he was so good at that.
I will have to check that out. Elmore Leonard, also another fantastic one for people to look up. And it makes me think, you were talking about the 1 page, 3 or 5 paragraph, 3 paragraph, 1 paragraph, 1 line. It makes me think of the Hemingway story in 1 line, which I'm sure I'm going to get slightly wrong, but it was something about the used baby shoes never worn, or I fucked it up. Yeah. baby shoes for sale, comma, never worn. Right. The sort of 5 or 6 word story. It's a really valuable exercise, and it's not just for academic purposes, as you pointed out. It translates to everything.
No doubt.
Vintage watches.
Oh my God! Here we go.
Tell me about vintage watches.
I'm into that. I'm into vintage watches. Let's see why. Well, first of all, I'm into watches. I'm into a lot of things that seem like there can only be one way to do it, but there turns out there's a lot of ways. So, for example, I love designing chairs. I don't design them myself, but I love looking at chairs, which are very simple things. It's like, you sit on them and that's what they do. And you're like, well, there can only be a few ways to do a chair, but it turns out there's so many different ways to do a chair. It's really interesting. And watches are the same thing. Vintage.
Do you have any favorite chairs, just as a side note?
I like a lot of stuff that his name is French, so I'll probably get it wrong, but Jean Prouvé, if I'm getting that right. I love his designs, his styles. There's a bunch of others. Maybe I'll send you an email afterwards to some of my favorite chairs. Perhaps I'll send you some links.
Sure.
So watches are similar in that, like, a watch basically, like, look, it's there to tell the time. Some watches can do more than others, but basically it's there to tell the time. And like, okay, you've got to, especially if you look at analog watches, which is why one of the reasons I like vintage stuff is it's like, a couple hands, 3 hands maybe, or 2 hands. But there's so many different designs and so many different styles and so many different elements and so many different approaches to it that there's an endless amount of curiosity in it for me. And plus, the cool thing about mechanical watches is that it's a combination of all the things I like. So it's design, it's engineering, it's materials, it's like patina and like seeing age on things. I love things that age well. It's art. It's science. Like if you crack open one of these watches and look at the movement, like there's some serious engineering going on in there and some science, material science, and some really fascinating stuff. And like the idea that mankind can capture time and tell it this way using springs and gears, it's kind of an amazing thing and be that accurate. So I've always I haven't always been into them, but my dad was into them. Maybe still is. I don't know if he collects stuff anymore, but he used to when I was younger, and I got into them. And the vintage thing, I'm actually kind of into vintage and modern these days, but more so I found vintage more interesting because there's more character in the objects because they have time on them. They actually have, age on them. And that's kind of cool to see how things age. And that's one of the reasons why, I like a lot of natural materials in general. Now I'm branching into architecture discussion here, but I like brick. I like wood. I like things that pick up age over time versus like, a lot of modern materials. I feel like they don't age very well. They look great when you do the photo shoot right after it's built, and then they just age poorly. And they show their age in a way that's not flattering, but in fact, it detracts from the quality of the object. So it's cool to see. The other thing I'll say about vintage watches is that it's really cool to be able to look down on your wrist and go, this thing I have on my wrist has been working for 50 years. And if someone looks after it 5 more times over the next 50 years or next 100 years, it'll still work. There's basically nothing that is being created today where that is true anymore, except really watches, mechanical watches. Most other things these days are disposable. And so it's kind of a great reminder that you can actually build things that last, and you can look down your wrist and go, someone else 50 years ago was looking down at their wrist, seeing the exact same thing, and it worked just as well. And 50 years from now, my kid can look down on his wrist or her wrist and see the same thing I looked at to tell the same amount of time, and it's going to work as well. And I just kind of love that idea. So anyway, that's sort of why I'm into it.
So a few things. The first is, at some point I need to introduce you to Peter Attia, MD, who's a close friend of mine and an extreme watch nerd.
Okay, good.
I think you guys would have a lot to talk about. If you could only pick, and I have no idea how many watches you have, you don't have to divulge that, but if you could only choose 1 to 3 watches to keep, do any come to mind where you're like, yep, these are definitely on the list?
Yes. So I have it's called a Rolex Milgauss 6541 is the model number, what they would call the reference number in the watch world. It's from 1958, and I just think it's the coolest fucking thing ever. So I just love the way it looks. It's so cool looking. It's awesome. So anyway, Rolex Milgauss 6541 from 1958. That's definitely one keeper. I have like an old Patek Philippe. I'm blanking on the reference right now. It was built for similar to this Milgauss that I was telling you about. By the way, Milgauss means 1,000 Gauss. So it was a watch built for scientists who worked in high magnetic environments, and watches typically, vintage ones, especially now modern ones, are a little bit different, but they don't work well in magnetic environments because the spring that's inside them, once it's magnetized, it can't tell time properly anymore, basically. So these watches were built for scientists to be amagnetic or anti-magnetic. And so the Milgauss was one of them, and then Patek made one. God, I can't remember the reference right now. Anyway,
you can send it. You can send it with your links to the chairs.
I'll send it. Yeah, exactly. It's also an anti-magnetic watch, and it was sort of their answer to the Milgauss. So it's funny that like the two things I come to mind immediately are like watches for scientists, which, you know, it's just what a cool niche, to makes a product for scientists in the 50s. Like how cool, like kind of, if you can imagine scientists in the 50s with their white coats and like learning all sorts of new things about physics in the world and biology, and all sorts of really cool stuff happened back then. Those are the two watches that immediately come to mind that I really, really dig. There's another one, actually, which is I'm going to get this name wrong too, so I'm just going to call it it's Jaeger-LeCoultre or Jaeger-LeCoultre or something like that. I never exactly know what it is. Anyway, it's called the Polaris from 1968. It's a dive watch built for divers, and it has an alarm on it. A mechanical alarm, which is really cool and really unique and rare, especially at the time, which I think is really beautiful and just a really neat complication for a mechanical watch to have an alarm on it. So you could say, like, for example, at 5 o'clock, I want this thing to buzz very loudly so I would know that it's 5 o'clock, which of course is so silly and easy to do with an iPhone or any digital thing. But mechanically, it was quite a challenge, and very few watches have ever had a mechanical alarm. I also like the way it looks. So anyway, there's some of that stuff that I'm into. There's a bunch of other things. But those are the kind of the three that initially come to mind as ones that I'm really into.
If you had to give a TED talk on obsessions, and it couldn't be related to your company, couldn't be related to watches, these are personal obsessions.
Yeah.
What might you talk about that a lot of people wouldn't know about?
Well, I don't know if I'd be able to talk about it. Well, I mean, okay.
I'm imagining all of the unacceptable, socially awkward sexual fetishes that you wouldn't be able to talk about on the TED stage. But continue.
I guess I didn't finish the sentence. I said maybe I wouldn't be able to talk about it with authority. Let's say. So let's say one of the things that I'm really into, strangely, is prairie restoration. Okay, so stand back here for a second. Let me fill you in on this. So maybe 10 years ago, I bought a farm up in rural Wisconsin, about 3 hours from Chicago where I live. It's like 50 miles west of Madison, Wisconsin, for those who kind of know the geography. And it's very rural land. It's kind of hilly. It's very beautiful. I bought it, and I'd always wanted some land. I love nature. I love just getting out and walking in nature. It's just, to me, the most refreshing thing you could ever do. And So I bought this land, and I looked at it and I thought it was just beautiful and amazing. And it was, but I learned a couple of years in that it was full of weeds and invasive species and like not really the way it should be, or was. But modern farming and the fact the land's been tilled a bunch of times and there's invasive species and stuff, it sort of took over the land. So I got on this kick to find a prairie restoration specialist, which I learned that there's this thing called prairie restoration where you could sort of bring the land back to the way it was, to prairie in this particular part of the country. And that prairie is in fact the most endangered natural habitat in the United States. There's only like something like 1,000 or something acres left of it in the entire United States. So people talk about old growth forests being gone and stuff. There's actually more old growth forests in the United States than there's prairie. Prairie is like gone basically. But I visited some actual prairies that have been restored and also some that are still around. And
endangered due to agriculture, I assume, or
yeah,
something.
Basically farming. Yeah, like people, all the land has been tilled basically for farmland. And I visited some of these prairies, and they just are the most beautiful thing. Hundreds of species of plants and flowers and shrubs and insects and birds, and it's just this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing. And so I have this land. It's quite a bit of acreage, and I started hired this guy to help me restore it. We've been doing it for 7-8 years now or something, bringing the land back to the way it was, like 5 acres at a time. And planting native species and getting rid of all the invasives, and also doing the same thing. There's some forests on the property, and I'm doing oak savanna restoration. So a lot of invasive trees have grown up around these big, huge, beautiful oak trees that are hundreds of years old, but they've been crowded by these other trees. So we're getting rid of some of the other trees and letting the oaks be the way they were, and then returning the forest floor to the way it was. And it's just such a incredibly rewarding but super slow process. It takes you seed these prairies. First of all, you have to kind of get rid of everything that's there, and then weeds pop up and you have to get rid of everything that's there because there's what's called a seed bank in the soil. So the seed bank is basically hundreds of years worth of seeds that have just been waiting to sprout. And so you have to kind of you clear out all the living stuff, and then there's all these seeds that are then now exposed to sunlight, and then they sprout, and you have to basically just kind of nuke it all for a while until there's nothing basically left in the soil. Or invasive species left in the soil. And then you can go and get native species by actually doing seed gathering. You can gather seeds at certain prairies, or you can buy seeds, native seeds. You can also find individual prairie plants in what's called prairie remnants, which are like small vestiges of old prairies that might still be on your property, and harvest the seeds from those. So it's this really, really slow, amazing thing. Then you seed it, and then it might take 5 or 6 years for a prairie to grow, because prairie plants typically invest all their energy in the first few years in the roots. So you don't see anything growing. It's really frustrating. It looks like shit for a long time. Then all of a sudden, a few years in, it starts to come up. And then it's just so rewarding and so wonderful to walk through. And so that's something that I'm really into in a deep way. And probably most people don't know about it in general. I didn't know about it until a few years ago, but I love it so much. And I'm kind of on this crusade now to like this anti-corn crusade. I want to basically, whenever land comes up next to my land, I want to buy it because most of it's corn. And corn is sort of at the root of a lot of different problems. And I just want to get rid of the corn and return the land to the way it was, and sort of create this patchwork of land, and then eventually put it in some sort of trust so it can never be touched, and there can always be these beautiful tracts of land forever. Of course, it'd have to be maintained, and that would have to be how the trust would have to be able to figure that out. Maybe part of it is farmed to fund that. But anyway, that's something that I would probably love to talk about, although I don't know enough about it to give a TED talk, but I could certainly talk someone's ear off for about an hour on all the little details that I've learned.
What a fantastic project.
It's such a fun thing, man.
It sounds therapeutic, too, in the sense that having to embrace slowness in at least one compartment of your life seems to be a nice counterbalance to potentially external or internal drives, not necessarily in you, but in a lot of people, certainly myself included at times, to do bigger things faster, right?
No doubt. And the other thing about that I'll say is that you can't even speed this process up if you wanted to. And that's what's so awesome about it. And by the way, the process is multi-layered and multi-tiered. And probably by this point, you're like, I should never have asked him this question first. But anyway, real quick, what's cool about it too is not only do the plants, new plants come up and all sorts of species bloom, but you start to see new insects. and new insects come a few years later, and they somehow, you're like, where'd they come from? And like, they're still out there, but they find it, and they're wired to proliferate in these environments. And then you see new birds and new bird species. There's like 100 and something bird species now on my property, when originally there weren't. There was like 40. And you're like, where'd they come from? And they just come from, they find it somehow and they come in. And then like, the other thing I've been learning is if you build a pond, for example, I don't have any pond, but I have a river. But if there's a pond, if you just fill a pond with water, within a few years, you will have fish. And you're like, what? How does that happen? Like, how could that possibly be? And it turns out like fish are, a bird might be eating a fish and drop it before it's dead, and it pops into there. And that could have been a pregnant fish. And before you know it, like the whole thing is like life, it's just waiting. First of all, it's not waiting, it's everywhere. But like if you restore a property, or restore some land and give it some space and let it do what it does, nature is so resilient and just wants to thrive. And it's so cool to watch it happen on its own schedule and nature is never in a hurry. That's the thing that I love so much about it, is that it's never in a hurry, but it accomplishes everything. And that's a quote that I read somewhere, and I don't know where I read it, who said it, but I love it, and I always think about it, which is that it'll take its time, and it'll get whatever it needs to get done, and however long it takes, which is such an analog, or such an opposite, not an analog, an opposite to humanity, which is always rushing, which is actually typically destroying, and which is getting faster and faster and faster. And I don't think it's the right path, but it is what it is.
Thank you for sharing. I love that. It also makes me think about how much of life is setting the conditions for good things to happen, not trying to force good things. And to give another example that the kind of biohacker / nutrition crowd might be interested in is the contrast between probiotics, where you're, say, swallowing bacteria you hope will take root in your gut, among other things, right? Which often does not work very well. Contrasted with prebiotics, where you're consuming different types of foodstuffs. Could be certain types of fiber, baobab root, for instance, which is effectively, this is very simplified, but restoring the soil conditions in your gut so that the types of bacteria you want to grow naturally begin to take root and grow. Mm-hmm. And you can't just take a handful of seeds and like drive them into the ground expecting them to pop out overnight. It just doesn't work that way. And so thinking about setting the conditions is something I've been thinking a lot about, to setting the conditions for positive emergent properties. And then secondly, I was just thinking about this today because I was watching a documentary last night where this mother was giving her son advice, and she said, "I just want you to learn patience. You need to learn patience." And I've thought over the years a lot about this word and whether I need more or less patience. And I was thinking today that maybe it's unproductive to think of it in terms of more or less patience, but rather in terms of developing the ability to discern between the things that can and should be accelerated and the things that can't be accelerated. And if you attempt to accelerate them, will just do more damage. Right?
Related to that, I mean, I love this idea that you're bringing up about probiotics versus prebiotics and creating the conditions for growth, or creating the conditions for desired outcomes or whatever. And I'm going to tie it all back. I mean, we're tying this let me tie like prairie restoration to business building, which is and gut building basically, and that gut health and the whole thing, which is that part of it too is not only creating the conditions for things to thrive, but also not creating conditions for certain things to thrive. So something, for example, our business is self-funded. Yeah, we did take money from Bezos in 2006, but that was personal founder shares. None of that money ever went into our business. David and I took some money off the table. So we've been 100% bootstrapped and funded by customers ever since day one, which means we've created a situation where we don't have to answer to anybody. We don't have to be on anyone else's time scale. I don't have to build something that I know is going to have to be sold in 7 years because a fund is coming due and like they need their money out of it. Or I also don't have to build something that grows at a certain rate because, you need to grow at a certain rate for a certain return. We don't care about returns. The conditions we've set are not to have returns thrive and generate returns for others. But actually what we've tried to set up is conditions for profitability and for sustainability, because as long as we make more money than we spend, we can exist for as long as we want. There's no external pressures, artificial pressures that we've set up or conditions that we've created that will force us to make a decision about when we have to sell the business at some point. So it's not only about creating conditions for thriving. It's about, like, in fact, putting up barriers for certain things not to happen. And I've been thinking a lot personally about I've been putting a lot of energy into making sure certain things don't happen versus putting energy into make sure certain things do happen. And I think if you can prevent a lot of things from happening by thinking about what you don't want, you do create the conditions then for other things to come in, which are the things that you actually do want. So I think there's a lot of similarities here between nature and business, and gut health is nature as well, of course, and conditions, and letting things sort of thrive and preventing other things from happening. I mean, it's cool. Like, for example, we have over 100 species of birds now on the property. We didn't put bird seed out. Like, you don't put bird seed out. What you do is you put seed out that grows in the ground that then creates the conditions where actually it grows seed. So it does actually grow bird seed, right? It grows bird seed. It just takes 5 years, and then birds find it. And then, like, everything just happens the way it naturally should at the right pace and the right scale. And it's just very rewarding to see that happening. And I think it does color your impression of other things, and sort of shows you in many ways how sort of silly speed is in a lot of other things where it's injected unnecessarily, and sort of the damage that it does.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a topic we could go on and on with for hours, I'm sure. So maybe we should do that at some point.
Yeah, another time. Yeah.
But let me wrap up with just a few more questions. And one of them I've asked you before, and this will sound familiar, and then I'll pause for a second and buy a little time. But if you could have a giant billboard anywhere with anything on it, what would it say and why? Right? It could be a quote, could be a word, could be a question, could be anything, could be someone else's quote. Now, I asked you this question in Tribe of Mentors, and you said one of these quotes, and you gave about 15 to 20, maybe more, 25 fantastic quotes. I mean, these are excellent quotes. But right now in your life, it doesn't have to relate to anything in the external, wider world. Let me read a few just to give people a taste, and then I'd love to know which one you would pick.
Sure.
Right now in your life, but let me pick a few here. If you think you're too small to be effective, you've never been in the dark with a mosquito. Betty Reese. Every great cause begins as a movement, becomes a business, and eventually degenerates into a racket. Eric Hoffer. This one has proven very popular. The fairest rules are those to which everyone would agree if they did not know how much power they would have. John Rawls. And I'll read one more since we've mentioned him a few times. Price is what you pay, value is what you get. Warren Buffett. Where would you go at this point in your life with a message, a word, a quote, a question, anything on a gigantic billboard? Metaphorically, of course, getting a message out to millions or billions of people.
Yeah. Well, I think it'd be fun just to say the word billboard on a billboard and just pay for it for 100 years. And there it is. It's called Billboard. But that would be kind of fun, but also a gag. I like that John Rawls quote so much, which is the fairest rules are the ones you would, I forget. Can you
agreed? Yeah. The fairest rules are those to which everyone would agree if they did not know how much power they would have. Yeah.
That to me is at the root of so many things. We've been dealing with a little bit of this in our own business. It's a little bit slightly different, but just like information asymmetry and recognizing that not everybody has the same information. So they look at things through different lenses. And it's very important to recognize the fact that you can't just come at something one way because you know it. If someone else doesn't know it, you can't assume that they knew that. And, it's the same sort of idea, which is you can't be upset when someone has a reaction to something when they just have a different set of information. And similarly, the rules are based on like who has the power to make them. Basically, today that's kind of how it is in almost everything. And so it's a good reminder that rules basically are the fairest to those who make them, unfortunately, but they would be the fairest if no one knew who they applied to. And it's just a good reminder on a lot of different levels. It's one of my favorite quotes, and I think that's probably something I would put up on a billboard. It'd be hard to read at 70 miles an hour as you speed by it, which is why I still like Billboard. But as a quote, I think it's one of the most meaningful quotes and most important quotes to keep in mind, whatever it is that you do.
Definitely. And I'll read one more just because. Actually, I'll read 2 more of your quotes because there are many to choose from. Here's one that applies certainly to a few things we've talked about in the conversation. Quote, "Not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted." William Bruce Cameron. And then the next and last one I'll read is by Albert Schweitzer. "In the hopes of reaching the moon, men fail to see the flowers that blossom at their feet." And
yeah. I've got a story, but let's maybe for another time about that quote.
Well,
or I can tell you now.
Let's do it. Let's just get into it.
Sure. So, I don't know, a number of years ago, I was invited to go to this. John Maeda invited me to go to this thing at the Glass House in New Canaan, Connecticut. I think it is the Philip Johnson Glass House, and it was like a summit on simplicity, and there was, I think, 10 or 15 people invited, and one of the people invited was this older man, this Japanese man. I think he was in his 80s or close to it. Almost everyone else was much younger, much younger, 20s and 30s, 40s maybe. And like I said earlier, I love older people, so I sort of gravitated to him. He was really well dressed and just seemed interesting. And I noticed that he was whenever we were going. So the Philip Johnson Glass House, the whole campus, I think is about 50 acres, and there's maybe a dozen different buildings. And it's kind of a neat idea because Philip Johnson had this idea that it's actually one building, and the hallways are just outside. Which is kind of a cool thought. But really, it's like 12 different buildings. Like, for example, he has an office, which was a separate building, which doesn't have a bathroom, doesn't have plumbing, because he didn't need it because it's still part of the house that has plumbing. I just have to walk outside to get there. Anyway, we were walking between these houses, and you have a 50-acre site, so there's kind of a bit of distance between these buildings. And I noticed that this guy was always last in the line to walk. And I kind of sat back with him on one of the walks, and but he was also like, it wasn't because he was old. That would be the first thing you would think, that he's just older, so he's going to walk slower. But actually, he's like, no. And I could tell that he was physically able to walk as fast as everybody else. It wasn't that. He goes, no, everyone's just walking too fast, and they're missing things as they go. He goes, so he just kneeled down, and he took like this square foot of ground. And by the way, I'd noticed as he was walking, he was looking down as well. So he's walking slowly and looking down, and he kind of took this square foot of land and like pointed out some flowers and some insects and some shapes and some stuff, and says like, this is beautiful. People feel like they have to go all over the world to see something new. All they have to do is look down. And if you walk slowly and look down, like there's a world under your feet all the time, an interesting world. And he goes, these people ahead of me, they're younger. Yeah, maybe they can walk a bit faster, but look at everything they're missing. And that really just kind of totally smacked me in the face. I love this point. Like, yeah, they're going faster and they look like they're going somewhere, but look at everything they're missing along the way. And so that point about that other quote that you just brought up about going to the moon, missing the flowers, like that's sort of a similar thing, which is, especially today where everyone's rushing all over the place trying to get somewhere. And you're like, where are you actually going and what are you actually missing? And I thought that moment, this guy actually stopping and physically explaining that to me and looking down and pointing out some things was a really poignant thing, and something I have always remembered since then.
What a lovely story.
Yeah. He's a lovely man. I think he's still around. I'm sure from what I understand, he's a Japanese garden expert. He has an amazing Japanese garden apparently in his backyard somewhere in Northern California. And he's also like a wine connoisseur and supposed to be a really fascinating guy. I never really caught up with him afterwards. I always meant to, and I missed that opportunity, and I should probably figure out how to get in touch with him. But wonderful man, really interesting person, and I appreciate the lesson he taught me there.
Well, if you track him down, let me know. Sounds like
I will.
Maybe the type of person to have on the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Someone who can really embrace the joy of missing out.
Yeah, the JOMO.
Jason, well, this has been so much fun. I really appreciate you taking the time today to chat with me and share your stories with the world also.
Well, thanks for having me. This is super fun. It's always fun to talk to you, and thanks for giving me so much time to do that.
My pleasure. And is there anything else before we wrap up that you would like to ask of the audience, suggest to the audience? Any closing comments of any type?
No, I don't have any, actually. I like answering questions, so I don't have any proclamations or anything to share. So I don't. if anyone wants to get in touch, I think you'll have some of that stuff. So feel free to hit me up on Twitter or wherever. Oh, the other thing, actually, I will mention, David and I, DHH and I, are doing this new YouTube channel, which is kind of something people have been asking for a while. We're calling it Getting Real. And we're basically showing what kind of like you asked me, like, what's your day like? Like, people always like, what's your morning like? And what do you do? I'm like, well, why don't I just show you? So we're doing these videos of actually walking through code samples, walking through design decisions, walking through design reviews, and making them all public. So I think it's kind of a neat thing to check out if you're interested in sort of how we look at design, how we look at code, and how we look at writing. One of the things I actually did was I wrote an article for Inc. recently, and I just recorded my screen and sort of talked out loud as I was writing it to sort of show, like, here's how I write an article. I don't start with an outline. I start with the blank sheet. I got kind of just write, and then I was sort of doing the director's cut as I went and editing live as I went. And it was sort of a fun sort of thing. So I'm doing some of that, which would be kind of fun to follow if people are interested in that. Other than that, I don't have anything else to share.
You've written a lot, and you have many popular articles, essays, blog posts, etc. online. If someone wanted to start with one or two, are there one or two that you could mention as a gateway drug into the mind of Jason?
Well, speaking based on our conversation today, there was the article I wrote about, like, I've never had a goal, which would be a good thing to start reading. I think or a good place to read. I think probably it's on our blog, Signal versus Noise, which is on Medium. If you search for my name on Google and say "never had a goal," you'll probably land on that article. That'd probably be a good. Jason Fried never had a goal. That'd probably be a good one to read. And then I also wrote one about not having expectations, which might be another interesting thing to look at. If there's any other ones, I mean, there are some other ones, but I'm not sure if they'd be good places to start. But those might be a good place to start.
Great, and I'll include chairs, maybe prairie restoration, the Polaris watch.
Yeah, I'll send you all that stuff.
We'll include all of that in the show notes. So for people listening, you'll be able to find all of that at tim.blog/podcast and just search Jason and he'll pop right up, and you can find all of these links and more, as well as every other episode. And Jason, at some point, maybe we'll do a round two, and it'd be lovely to see you in person sometime.
Yeah, you're down. Where are you now?
I'm in Austin, Texas.
Okay, you're in Austin. Okay, well, at some point, yeah, we'll run into each other again. But I'd love to do it again, and if we want to do it in person, that'd be even better. So let me know. I'm around.
Definitely. Yeah, you know, Austin, Texas, it's the third coast, as they say.
They said that about Chicago, too. So I think every other place is the third coast.
Is the third coast.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Don't you need water to be a coast? I mean, at least in Chicago,
yeah, we have lakes. We do have some creeks. We're not entirely dry. There are rivers. So we do have that. But to be continued, and to everyone out there on the interwebs and beyond, as always, thank you for listening. Be safe or not, and pay attention to what's under your feet. So until next time, thanks for listening. Hey guys, this is Tim again. Just a few more things before you take off. Number one, this is 5 Bullet Friday. Do you want to get a short email from me? Would you enjoy getting a short email from me every Friday that provides a little morsel of fun before the weekend? And 5 Bullet Friday is a very short email where I share the coolest things I've found or that I've been pondering over the week. That could include favorite new albums that I've discovered. It could include gizmos and gadgets and all sorts of weird shit that I've somehow dug up in the world of the esoteric as I do. It could include favorite articles that I've read and that I've shared with my close friends, for instance. And it's very short. It's just a little tiny bite of goodness before you head off for the weekend. So if you want to receive that, check it out. Just go to 4hourworkweek.com. That's 4hourworkweek.com, all spelled out, and just drop in your email, and you will get the very next one. And if you sign up, I hope you enjoy it. This episode is brought to you by WordPress.com. I love WordPress. I have used it for so many years. It's my go-to platform for blogging and creating websites. I use WordPress.com for everything every day. My site, tim.blog, is built on it. The websites for my books, including Tools of Titans, Tribe of Mentors, it's all on WordPress.com. And the founder, Matt Mullenweg, one of my close friends, has appeared on this show many times. Just search Matt Mullenweg Tequila Ferris for quite an exciting time. Whether you're looking to create a personal blog, a business site, or both, you can make a really big impact right out of the box when you build on WordPress.com.
And you'll be in good company. It's used by The New Yorker, Jay-Z, Beyonce, 538, TechCrunch, TED, CNN, and Time, just to name a handful. And one of my friends at Google, she'll remain nameless, has told me that WordPress.com offers the, quote, best out-of-the-box SEO imaginable, end quote. And it's one of the many reasons that nearly 30% of the internet is run on WordPress. You do not need experience or to hire someone. That's perhaps the best part. WordPress.com guides you through the entire experience. They have hundreds of designs and templates that you can use. And it's easy to get started. There's no need to worry about security, upgrades, hosting, any of that. They offer 24/7 support, and they're very, very responsive. If you have questions, they get right back to you. And this allows you to create the highest quality with the least amount of headache and friction. So if you're building a website, period, and my friends come to me and ask what I use, what I recommend they use, the answer is WordPress.com. So check it out. If you want to get started today, learn more with a 15% discount off any new plan. Go to WordPress.com/Tim to create your website and find the plan that's right for you. So learn more. Take a look. WordPress.com/Tim for 15% off a brand new website. Check it out. This episode is brought to you by Peloton. And I'd heard about Peloton over and over again, but I ended up getting a Peloton bike and the whole system after I saw my buddy Kevin Rose. I've known him forever, some of you know, and he showed up at my gate at my house a while back, and he looked fantastic. And I asked him, I said, dude, you look great. What the hell have you been up to? Because he's always doing a weird diet or another, but it only lasts like a week or two. So he always regresses to the mean after like 75 beers. And he said, I've been doing Peloton 5 days a week. Now that caught my attention because Kevin does nothing 5 days a week. And you know I love you, Kevin. But it really piqued my curiosity. Ended up getting a system, and it's become an integral part of my week. I love it, and I really didn't expect to love it at all because I find cycling really boring usually. But Peloton is an indoor cycling bike that brings live studio classes right into your home. You don't have to worry about fitting classes into your schedule or making it to a studio with some type of commute, etc. New classes are added every day, and this includes options led by elite New York City instructors in your own living room. You can even live stream studio classes taught by the world's best instructors or find your own favorite class on demand. And in fact, Kevin and I rarely do live classes, and you can compete with your friends, which is also fun. Kevin, I'm coming after you. But we usually just use classes on demand. I really like Matt Wilpers and his high-intensity training sessions that are shorter, like 20 minutes. And I think Kevin's favorite is Alex, and everyone seems to have their favorite instructor, or you can select by music, duration, and so on. Each Peloton bike includes a 22-inch HD touchscreen, performance tracking metrics. I think that, along with the real-time leaderboard, are the main reasons that this caught my attention when cycling never had caught my attention before. It's really pretty stunning what they've done with the user interface to keep your attention. The belt drive is quiet, and it's smaller than you would expect, so it can fit in a living room or an office. I actually have it in a large closet, believe it or not, and it fits with no problem. So Peloton is offering all of you guys, listeners of the Tim Ferriss Show, a special offer, and it is actually special. Visit One Peloton, that's OnePeloton, onepeloton.com, and enter the code TIM, all caps, TIM, at checkout to receive $100 off accessories with your Peloton bike purchase. Now you might say, meh, accessories? Wait, I don't need fancy towels or whatever other supplemental bits and pieces. No, the shoes you need. You need the clip-in shoes, and those are in the accessory category. So this $100 off is a very legit $100 off. So if you want to get in your workouts, if you want a convenient and really entertaining way to do high-intensity interval training or anything else, or you just want to get a fantastic gift for someone, check out Peloton. OnePeloton.com and enter the code TIM. Again, that's OnePeloton.com and enter the code TIM at checkout to receive $100 off any accessories, including the shoes that you will want to get. Check it out, OnePeloton.com, code TIM.